Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, building a robust security awareness program. And we've got an incredible lineup of security solutions on the EcoCast today. You'll hear from our experts at Cofense, Rubrik, Rapid7, Duo, Kemp, KnowBe4, and Security Scorecard. And I'm excited to see some new names on the EcoCast today presenting that you've never seen before. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a great event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational. We in Actual Tech Media are all former IT professionals ourselves, and we know how tough it can be out there in the world of enterprise IT, especially in the area of security. And security awareness amongst you and the IT staff, your executives, and your end users has never been more important than it is right now. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about the event. We've got some great prizes lined up for you. I'll talk about those in just a moment. I will be asking you some poll questions periodically throughout the event, and we appreciate your participation in those. We also want to help to answer your questions there in the questions pane of your audience console. Many of you have already found that and said good morning or hello from across the United States and around the world, and we appreciate that. But we also want your security questions related to today's solutions. And to help encourage that, we have our best question prizes. I'll talk about that in just a moment. We also want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly from your audience console, and the hashtag for today will be automatically appended. And then finally, there in the handouts tab, we have a number of resources I encourage you to check out. I hand selected resources from each of today's expert presenters. Make sure that you download those. There's special ebooks, special trial links, and promotions that you need to check out. The prizes on the EcoCast today are 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify, and I'll be announcing the winners periodically throughout the event. We also have our best question prizes, one for each of the different sessions on the event today. That's a lot of additional Amazon $50 gift cards. The prize winners will be selected based on those who ask questions and who met the Actual Tech Media prize policy. Those terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We will reach out to you via email after the event. All prize winners have the option to donate their prize value to selected charities that you see here on the screen. Over the years, we've donated thousands of dollars to charities. If you win a prize and you would like to donate it to charity, we would love to help you do that. The hashtag for today is ATM EcoCast over on Twitter. I'll be following that hashtag. And of course, we appreciate you sharing what you learn on the event. You can also follow Actual Tech Media and me, David M. Davis, your moderator, as well over on Twitter. Subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels, YouTube, Facebook, and our 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes podcast store. And of course, follow Actual Tech Media on LinkedIn. There are links to all of these social channels there in your audience console. We also encourage you to check out gorilla.guide. You'll find a link to it there in the handouts tab where you can download free, easy to read enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts. We're releasing new titles all the time. These are a really fun way to learn about enterprise technology. You can download these onto your Kindle or mobile device and join the Gorilla Guide book club to ensure that you get the latest releases. At the end of the event, you'll be automatically redirected to our Refer a Friend page. There's also a link to this there in your Handouts tab. This is where if you refer an IT friend or coworker to Actual Tech Media's online events, you'll get a $5 Amazon gift card. And even better, those that you refer, if they register for an event, they will also get an Amazon $5 gift card. That way, everybody's a winner. I love it. Now, before I introduce you to our first presenter, I want to first set the stage for today's topic. The title of my keynote presentation today, can you guess it? Ransomware, and that's right, more ransomware, with the tagline being, are you ready? Are you ready for the ransomware onslaught that's plaguing companies of all sizes? According to one Forrester research study, ransomware is up 500% this year. And that probably comes as no surprise to those of you out there who are dealing with the ransomware threat on a daily basis. But it's really an amazing number if you think about it, 500%. And other studies tell us that there are new ransomware infections every 11 seconds. So by the time I finish this introduction, there will have been 81 new ransomware infections somewhere in the world. And these ransomware infections are all costing us a lot of money. In fact, CSO Online estimates that the cost of security breaches, not just ransomware, but security breaches around the world for 2021 will cost us all $6 trillion. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot of money. Now, we keep looking for the silver bullet when it comes to ransomware. What's the next new tool that we can implement or the security feature we can turn on to just prevent these ransomware infections once and for all? How can we rid ourselves of this plague? But I'm sorry to be the one to tell you there is no silver bullet, as the saying goes. We all need to practice defense in depth, and it really takes an ecosystem, a layering of tools. There's so many different types of tools out there. You'll learn about a lot of these on the event today. Network detection and response, NDR, endpoint detection and response, EDR, user behavioral analytics using AI and machine learning. There are SIEM systems or security information and event management tools, identity and access management. That's critical. You have to know who you're really talking to, who is really authorized to do what. And of course, as your last line of defense, you have to protect your data with a solid data protection tool and make sure that that backup does not itself get infected with ransomware. Make sure that it's immutable. And then finally, kind of the highlight of the event today, and that is security awareness and user education. And I'm afraid too many companies don't do enough when it comes to security awareness and user education, because that type of security education can really prevent, in many cases, so many of these security breaches and ransomware attacks from ever happening in the first place. Now, I don't know if any of you ever went through the Cisco security certifications like I did, but one of the important things you had to know about right off the start was what they called the security wheel. And the security wheel, there's many different forms of it, and it's been improved over time. But basically, you've got the security policy in the middle, and that defines everything you do in security. But security is a continuous process. You have to constantly not just secure your organization once and then you're done. You have to secure it and then monitor it over time and then continually test. Just like with security awareness, you need to test your users. You need to test fish those users to see if they are really secure and then improve what you do. That's the training, the education, perhaps implementing new tools, new solutions, and then secure again. And this is really a never ending process. That's ye old security wheel, as I jokingly call it. Now, we all need to improve our security. We all need to educate our users and improve our security awareness. Most likely, we all need better data protection and more layers to our defense in depth. And that's why I believe personally that this event is a great opportunity for so many of you out there to learn about some of the newest, most innovative, and most effective security solutions on the planet today, all in one fast-paced event. So before I introduce you to our first presenter from Cofense, we're going to go to a couple of poll questions. All right, the first of two poll questions is there on the screen now. It says, do you currently have a security awareness program implemented at your company? And I'm curious to see the results of this and, see how many of you out there, what percentage have already implemented some sort of security awareness program. I guess a good follow-up question would have been, are you happy with that security awareness program and do you feel that it's effective? But I'll let everyone respond to this question here. If you haven't done these polls before, you just do it right in the slides window, click on the option that corresponds to you and your company, and then I'll share the results here in just a moment, and you can see how you stack up with your peers. All right, if you aren't seeing the poll on the screen, one person says they're having trouble, just push refresh on your web browser, and 99% of the time that will resolve any sort of issue. Let me go ahead and share the results of this with you. And it looks like 78% do have some sort of security awareness program implemented at their company. Good for you. I hope that it's been effective for you. You'll learn about a number of new options around security awareness on the event today. And, perhaps if you even already have a program implemented, you might find a new solution even that you like better. So we'll see. Next question on the screen is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating your existing security solutions at your company? So not just security awareness, but just kind of at a higher level in terms of all security solutions at your company. Are you looking to take some action in the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, or perhaps you're not sure? All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to that poll. It's now time to kick off our security expert presentations here on the EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce you to our first presenter. That is Tanya Dudley, who is a strategic security advisor at new presenter on the EcoCast today, CoFence. Tanya, thanks for being on. Take it away.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting us to be a part of this today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about building a robust security awareness program, specifically when it comes to your phishing defense program. So and simulation. So let me just give you, I'll start out with who is CoFence, and then go into some elements about getting started with building your program and then advancing it as we set up our simulation program as one of the elements of your security awareness program, because obviously there's so many risks in your environment that you need to address. So it always helps with starting, what are the most riskiest behaviors that you're seeing your users do when it comes to security incidents within your organization. So that's really where you should start. And we all know that phishing is by far one of the biggest threats that your organization can see today. So I'm going to start with our phishing and detection response platform. And I'm going to start here with on the top right-hand side where we talk about PhishMe. So PhishMe is our phishing simulation platform. It's what our co-founders originally built this organization on as PhishMe back in the day. Rohit Balani and Aaron Higby are co-founders. They realized there was something interesting about being able to simulate this process of delivering a phishing email to the inbox of the user and actually using that as a training moment. We've seen for years being able to roll out CBTs and, listening to a CBT, do your users really pay attention to that? Are they engaged with it? Do they actually learn from that? And what we found is that by simulating a phishing email in the place where they're going to experience it, they're more likely to be able to learn from that experience. And we also see that over time, it can take many simulations to be able to get that user to understand and identify what a real phish is. And we'll get a little bit into that as I talk about, starting your program and then advancing your program. So from PhishMe, within our PhishMe platform, we also have some content when it comes to, sending out newsletters, because not everything is about phishing, but sometimes you want to reinforce some phishing email templates that are maybe a little too sensitive. We always recommend, don't use sensitive topics when you're doing your simulation. Really focus on those phishing emails that are getting to the inbox. So avoid using phishing templates that are bonus related, and especially in the last year and a half, we've purposely avoided not putting COVID themed phishing templates in our platform. But so we have some newsletters and some other content that you can leverage to engage your users with learning how to identify, or what does that real phish look like when it comes to those phishing themes. And then as our co-founders realized that, there's more to just simulating this phishing threat, it's also giving the user the mechanism and the instructions on how to report that phish. I know back when I started my program in 2011, I had my security operations team asking me, hey, can you tell them how to send it to us? And it needs to be as an attachment. Don't just forward it to us, because we need everything. And, we need all the headers and we need all this content so that we can actually investigate the phish. And so that's where, we developed Reporter, and Reporter bundles it in a way that the security operations team can be able to have all of the elements and the IOCs that are necessary for them to mitigate and investigate that phish and look for doing some threat hunting within the organization. But as we made it easier for the user to hit that, hit that easy button, it also then increased the volumes that our security teams were seeing. And so I can remember both my security operations team and my previous two organizations said, okay, can you turn the button off, please? And we're like, no, we actually want them to keep reporting that. So then we built Triage. Triage allows the security operations team to be able to quickly dig and find elements, find those phishing threats in the organization. While these next few products are more on defending the organization against phishing threats, in Triage, we actually have a response mechanism. So as the user reports that message in, we allow you to set up that response back to them. And that's another training moment that happens when they send in that real phish, or maybe they're sending in a spam message or an internal message. You can craft those responses back to that user that lets them know, hey, that was a real phish. Thanks for helping us defend the organization against that phishing threat. Or, sorry, that was just spam. You can go ahead and unsubscribe to that. So the more that they get this close that loop feedback to your users, it really helps them understand what's a real phish, what's not, what do I need, what's safe for me to engage with. So closing that loop out with your end users is such a critical moment of that training process as well. The other two products that we have, Vision and Intelligence, those are really more geared to our security operations team, but it really does help play into this full phishing and defense platform of being able to do some threat hunting and look for those email messages as they come in to be able to proactively block those and remediate those from your end user's inbox. And then our Intelligence product is a standalone product. However, we use that to feed into PhishMe for templates, being able to craft real live phishing emails into our PhishMe platform, so that you're, as an operator, you can quickly, look for what's most relevant, what are most recent phishing templates that I want to make sure that I'm being able to proactively communicate to my users or simulate to my users so that they understand what the threat landscape looks like. Because, as phishing threat landscape is constantly evolving and changing, because threat actors know that as we put more controls in place, that there's different mechanisms and tactics that they need to use now to get by those. So we start to see, different file attachments. Are they leveraging trusted cloud services that your organization may be also leveraging? So it's really important to stay on top of the phishing threat landscape when you're doing your simulation program. And I'll get into some of that too as we talk about building out your program. So now I'm just going to talk really quickly about when it comes to the phishing threat landscape, and why it's so important to gear your simulation program and your awareness program around what are the real threats that we're seeing. And so this was from our 2021 annual report that we published in early March this year. It's a consolidation of the data that we saw through 2020 in our Phishing Defense Center, where we manage phishing programs for our customers. And of all of those messages that our users are reporting into their organization's report phishing button, 9% of those are malicious. So like I said, once you make it easy for users to quickly report that message, there's a lot that comes in there, but being able to quickly sift into finding those malicious emails is what's really critical. And so now as I start to break down that 9% of those malicious emails, I have 3 different buckets that I put those into: credential phish, malware, and then BEC, which is business email compromise or CEO fraud, depending on how it's referenced in your region. So I'm going to start with our credential phish at the top right left-hand corner. By far, the biggest threat that we see to organizations today is credential phish. And why is that? Because as organizations are moving to Office 365 hosted services, threat actors are after targeting those credentials so that they can leverage those legitimate user credentials to be able to access your organization as a legitimate user to go unnoticed. It helps them navigate through the environment to deliver further threats to your environment. So if you haven't already started your program and you haven't done credential phish, I don't recommend it to be the first phish that you send out in a simulation, but you do need to get to a point where you're comfortable sending a phishing simulation that is credential themed, because that is what threat actors are targeting your users with. And if you really want them to be prepared and not have to deal with a real incident, then it takes, it's worth your effort to set up that phishing simulation to target that. And when we look at the themes, and I'm going to go through this in a little bit on the next slide when I talk about Microsoft. So because we're all going to O365 hosted, threat actors know this. They've learned what the Microsoft templates look like. And so they're emulating those, they're spoofing those to your end users. And so that's why it's really critical that you prepare them on what that phishing simulation or phishing email would look like. When I drop down to the lower left, we see that 12% of those are malware. So we see fewer attachments. So attachments are difficult to get into your organization in a simulation program. And therefore, it's the same way that the threat actors are having that difficulty time, because we've gotten so good. We've gotten much better at protecting our gateway through our security mode gateway controls that we have in place. So what they're doing is not only delivering malware less and less through an attachment, but using a URL link to direct them to a trusted provider that you might be already using as a legitimate resource within your organization. So now when I go to the top right, we see 17% of these messages were finance themed. And why is this critical? So this is critical when you start to look at who's highly targeted in my organization and who really needs to understand that they are a target, and how to prepare them for really looking at, are you expecting that as a legitimate user or sender that's sending you that message? And as we start to see the threat actors going more downstream to that third party, in compromising that third party resource to then be able to make their way into that larger enterprise is what we're seeing. And so when you look at finance themes, their invoice, purchase order, quotes, things that your finance team does legitimately. So not only have the threat actors learned what platforms you're using, they now also are understanding your business processes and why they're using those finance themes to target your users. So keep these themes in mind as you're trying to prepare what it is I should be simulating to my users and preparing them for a phishing threat that's going to land in their inbox. And BEC, business email compromise. So these are conversational emails. We like to refer to them because they might be there's no attachment, there's no link in the message. It's simply a, hey, do you have a minute? They're trying to start that conversation with somebody, they're spoofing a known person in your organization, or maybe somebody that they do business with, to get that confidence of, oh, hey, I know who this person is, or this is somebody of authority. I need to engage with this conversation. And so you'll see them go back and forth a few times before they actually give the recipient, hey, this is what exactly I need you to do. It might be, something of, do you have a minute? Yeah, what do you need? I need you to get some gift cards for me, or I need you to change my direct deposit. So these are more geared towards, fraud and gaining funds from the organization. We do also see them interacting with going after, if you're in finance, maybe asking for your accounts receivable register, because now they can get a list of, what are your outstanding balances. And now I can send your finance team a targeted email that says, hey, here's this invoice from so-and-so that you do business with. So it kind of drives up that confidence level to the recipient of, oh, they owe us this money. I need to send this money now to this new bank account that they may be doing. BEC comes down to really making sure that you understand your business processes and that your teams understand that it's critical that they follow, having multiple signatures, what your review process is, what your approval process is for any of those messages that might be coming in. So I'm going to hover here for a second on why do we simulate. So simulation, like I mentioned, is the best way for your users to get that learning moment at the moment that they're in their inbox. So one of the features that we have within PhishMe is responsive delivery. So delivering that email at the moment that the user is in their inbox. So why is that important? We know that, everybody, we all live out of our inbox, right? It's how we get things done, how we communicate with one another. It's how how we get what's important. I need to work on this thing right now. So if we can get that message in front of that user in the way that they are interacting with a real fish, the more likely they're going to learn from that moment. And we know that, over the years of using CBTs and other learning elements are not as effective as the simulation methodology. So one of the things that I talked about on the last screen was, going after credentials and then using Microsoft and well-known brands. So one of the things that's really critical in your security awareness program is understanding what your business processes are and having your teams that support those systems really communicate to your end users what is legitimate. What is the thing that you are doing in your organization? How should you expect that communication to come across? So that when maybe something gets spoofed for a DocuSign or a WeTransfer or some other service that maybe you're legitimately using, we've seen them use SurveyMonkey to deliver an invoice. Now we all know that why would I get an invoice coming from SurveyMonkey? But literally they're looking for any of those hosted services to deliver that malicious campaign. So when we look at this email and we click on it, and this is where I really want to emphasize that having a punitive program when it comes to phishing simulation really distracts your users from even wanting to do the right thing. I have spoken to many that have started to do rewards program and encouraging that positive feedback when it comes to phishing simulation is where you're really going to gain the best success with your overall program. But looking at this, it looks legitimate. ID helped us. Maybe that's how your organization sends out communications to your users. It might be kind of easy to recognize that maybe that Microsoft logo isn't how it really acts. But the next thing that we need to do, especially if you're starting to go, we see many organizations going, migrating to hosted Office 365 to really make your users help them understand what the URL path should be. So maybe they clicked on that link because they were in a hurry and they didn't realize it, but stop and take a pause. When you get to this landing page, right, they all have this, these beautiful imagery. It looks something very common that Microsoft uses with the login page. Look at that URL. That URL is going to tell you, is that something with my organization? Should I be entering my credentials here? And if you've enabled MFA, help them understand when they should be putting in their credentials and when they don't need to because they've already been authenticated to your Microsoft environment or whatever your third-party hosted, how you're supposed to be logging into those third parties programs. So now if you're just getting started on your phishing simulation program, I'm gonna just kind of go briefly over a few quick helpful tips on how to get started. So the first thing you should do is announce your program. Letting your users know, hey, we're going to be doing some simulations. This isn't a game of gotcha. We're really here to help you understand this is what a real fish looks like and what you should do when you find that fish. Report that fish, use that reporter button, use that, whatever your process is for getting them to report real fish. And then identify what are the gaps in your inbox? What is it that's making it through to the inbox because they're actually getting through to your end users. So finding those to be able to identify, okay, these are the types of messages that I want to simulate because these are legitimate. And that really helps when you get that user that is a little uncomfortable with the fact that they've gotten this simulation and they feel targeted, right? When you can, point them back to, here's the real fish that we base this on. It wasn't to target you, really to help them understand that it's not about targeting them. It's really to help prepare them for that real fish. And then set up a monthly cadence. So when you're just getting started, we know that it takes up to 4 simulations before, those users get it. Some recognize it right away, and some it just takes over 3 or 4 simulations before they actually like, okay, I got this now. I'm figuring this out. So set up that monthly playbook and then send follow-up, like I mentioned earlier, giving them that closing the loop, helping them know this was just a simulation. Thank you for reporting this. You did the right thing, encouraging that positive behavior. And then when it comes to your repeats, as I mentioned, wait until you've given them a chance to learn before you then start sending follow-ups, and send a follow-up message just to those people that clicked more than 3 times. And a separate campaign, something similar, very close to the time that you just launched. So if you launched it on Monday, maybe 2 weeks later, do another campaign to just those users to kind of reinforce that learning moment so that it's still fresh in their mind. And then as you advance your program and you've gotten to a really high report rate, you feel comfortable, everyone's talking about it, you have your senior leadership reinforcing the importance of reporting that phishing email, then you can start to add in some advanced elements to your program. So setting up a new hire program. So as you onboard your employees, then you're able to give them a simulation right away within the first 30 days of them starting, so that they are brought into the rest of the maturity level of your organization. Like I mentioned earlier, look at who's being targeted with real phish in your organization. Is it your finance team? Is it your legal team? Is it your HR team? And give those functional groups more frequent campaigns, because when you get to a point of having a high report rate, 50%, 60, 70%, then you can kind of back off your simulations to just do quarterly. But you still want to make sure that those highly targeted ones are getting it more often, just so that they understand, hey, don't forget you're targeted. So don't forget to report that message as you identify those phishing threats. And so I want to thank you for listening to our building out a program. And as I turn it back over and go off to Q&A, I just want to give you a couple of links here. We have some great resources for the month of October that you can enhance your program with, or if you're looking for a live demo, there's a link on the screen there. So David, I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent presentation, Tanya. Really appreciate that. Really eye-opening and educational, and some great actionable information there. So thank you for that. We do have some questions for you from the audience. The first one here is they're asking, what's the best way to measure effectiveness of the CoFence program?
Sure. So I know sometimes the awareness team can sit within the GRC side of the house or in the learning and development teams. And sometimes it's real easy to get caught up on those metrics around the program. But at CoFence, we really believe, and it's really about that real phish, and building out that full, robust phishing defense program to move the needle on really defending your organ against a phishing threat. And so we really focus on that report rate. We have a metric that within our platform that we call resiliency rate. Is so looking at anything, a resiliency rate above 1 is lets you know that, okay, even if somebody clicks on that message, we have resilient users that are going to report that phish. So reporting is going to let us know that maybe somebody interacted with the phish. So we look at report rate and resiliency rate as really kind of the metrics that really help you understand the maturity level, and is it getting through? Is it working for our organization?
Got it. Okay, excellent. And then next question here, they're asking, how often should you run a simulation campaign?
Yeah, so as I kind of pointed out, as you're getting started, doing it monthly is probably the best thing. And because we see that frequency really does play a part in this. And when I had previously run programs in organizations, I did the same thing. I increased the frequency as something new came in. When ransomware was a big thing many years ago as file attachments, I then did monthly campaigns to get everyone aware of, okay, this is what a ransomware at that time. Ransomware is much different today than it was back then. And then as that report rate climbed to 75%, I backed it off to quarterly, but then again, found those frequent clickers to be more frequently. And then when you can get to that moment where you have a really good report rate and you feel your users are comfortable with reporting, and then you can back it off, as I mentioned, to quarterly, because you also don't want to overwhelm them. So, they get a lot in their inbox. It's very busy. They have a lot going on. So you don't want to overwhelm them with giving them too many stimulations, because they do get exhausted. I had one guy in my previous org who literally sent the message back and said, if I report these 5 times, can you stop sending me these? I had to reassure him that even everyone up to our executive level, including our CEO, was also getting these. So that wasn't an option. We were also highly regulated, and I had to give my results to the regulator. So so you can, you get a sense for your users get tired of these over time. So you want to make sure you're not overwhelming them to the point of exhaustion. And then they just want to set up rules and auto delete those messages, and they don't even want to interact with you. So critical to that, finding that right balance of how often to run.
Excellent. Yeah, great advice. And then I know we're running out of time here in our live Q&A, but I wanted to ask you this final question, and that is for the folks out here who indicated that they'd like to get started with CoFence and learn more. What do you recommend?
Go to our website. If you look on the link there, go.cofence.com/live demo. That's going to get you access to somebody that's going to interact with you quickly to be able to get you a demo and just look at our full end-to-end program to really build out your that robust security awareness program.
Excellent. All right. Well, Tanya, thank you so much for being on the event today. Great presentation.
Thanks for having us.
I've just brought up the poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the CoFence solution? And I'll leave that up there for everyone to respond to here for a moment while we ready our next presenter from Rubrik. And I want to point out to everyone that we do see your questions coming in. There is an issue today with the platform where it seems like we are unable to respond electronically to questions. The responses aren't going back, but we do see your questions coming in. I am sorting them to each of the expert presenters today to answer in the live Q&A. So I guess the thing to know is that you might not get it back as many electronic responses here in the platform as normal, but we will do our follow-up after the event electronically to any questions that we don't have time for during the live Q&A sessions. All right, thank you to everyone here who responded to the poll on the screen about CoFence. If you'd like to learn more in any shape or form, we encourage you to respond there to that poll because we're about to move on to the next presentation. And with that, I'm excited now to bring in our next presenter. Welcome, Mr. David Stiles, Field CTO at Rubrik. David, are you with us?
I am, Dave. Dave, it's always good to talk to you.
Hey, it's good to chat with you again, David. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. Again, yeah, Dave Stiles. I'm the Global Field CISO for Rubrik. And I'm going to talk to you today about how you can enable operational resiliency and business continuity to help your business recover from ransomware, is a view from our perspective of zero trust data management. So ask yourself, which disaster scenario is worse, or would you rather face? The Category 5 hurricane bearing down on your organization's location, or the unknown adversary who may have been in your environment for 100+ days, who is now stealing your data out the door and is going to eventually drop a ransomware attack on you. Obviously, they're both substantial events, and they both need response plans. The response plans for each type of these events, though, are totally different. And if you're thinking about it in the terms of I have a disaster recovery plan and I can deal with both these situations with that plan, you're not going to be able to do that today. And we're going to walk through why. So really, what's the difference? Let's set some terminology so everybody's talking from the same page to start with. Disaster recovery is obviously something that happens typically in an event. It could be a physical event. It could be an electronic failure event. But it's something that's usually happened to a physical infrastructure. Oftentimes it's caused by a natural disaster. And that recovery is typically owned and driven by the IT department. Now, in the event of business continuity, losing an application or losing the revenue systems, you're going to be able to recover those back, and you're going to have to do it to a predefined point in time or predefined service level. And that's going to end up usually being driven by the business itself. And IT in that function typically reports to that recovery team or the business unit that they're responsible for supporting during the duration of that event. But when you have a cyber event or an operational resiliency event, you're doing this at a totally different level. You have to continue to operate the business in the middle of an adverse event that you may not even understand was completely happening yet. And when you look at it from the ransomware perspective, it's typically going to impact the entire enterprise, all the sections, all the different business units, oftentimes many different geographies. And of course, you're always usually going to have some external counsel and most likely governmental involvement involved in this recovery effort. So it's a total hands-on type of operational event that if you're writing the DR plan for, you may not have thought about these extra people. When we look at the landscape of ransomware today, it really is an evolving threat. Just over the last year, we've seen an explosion in the type of events that have happened, both not only in the sensationalizing of it, but what the type of impact it is. Now, ransomware as a service is obviously kind of that low-level attack, and this is where you think about, the traditional, hit them and try to extract money. The ransomware as a service business has gotten to be very sophisticated, though. The ransomware kits that are available on the dark web can easily be procured for $50 and have a very good effective ratio of getting in. However, there are different levels of actors when it comes to ransomware. Right? You have your hacktivism, which would be above your kind of script kiddie type of approach. But then you have your organized crime syndicates and your nation state sponsors. And they're looking at it from a totally different level. Oftentimes when they get in the environment, they're doing it very strategically, and they're doing it to the perspective of stealing not only money from you from the ransomware, but through the ability to steal your information. So we're seeing more and more double extortion happen now in the industry. So they'll steal your data, they'll exfiltrate it out, and then they'll threaten to make it public. And at the same time, they're going to drop a ransom on you, and that's going to be a substantial amount. We're seeing now in the industry payments last year that were over $30 million, and that was just the payment for the ransomware. It doesn't include the exponential damages that come along with that, from brand impact, loss of business, compliance requirements, and things along those lines. So we'll look at a couple of different scenarios here. Now, obviously, I think almost everybody is at least peripherally aware of the Colonial Pipeline event. Obviously, it was critical infrastructure that was impacted. Colonial Pipeline supplies over 45% of the fuel for the entire East Coast of the United States, from Linden, New Jersey to the Gulf Coast. And when that pipeline went down, all the critical fuels that are needed for both transportation of cars and trucks, but also airplanes, were impacted. Now, this attack was not a very sophisticated attack. It actually was a ransomware as a service attack. It was bought and was leveraged. They happened to buy a very good tool, and it had quick impact. Now, the impact to the pipeline was substantial because when you power off the pipeline, it doesn't power back on overnight. You have to go through a very substantial process to be able to bring that pipeline back up and do it safely. So really the impact was obviously felt by a lot of citizens, and the citizen reaction was really worse than the attack. The internal IT team actually had operational resilience in place. They had the ability to execute that plan. They were very successful at recovering. Now, some people will say, I heard that Colonial may have paid the ransom, and they did. They paid it because they had some external pressure to help them understand if they made the payment, they would be able to track down the offender, and they did, and they were able to return that money. But really the primary reason for this attack was exfiltration of cash out of the business. It wasn't to shut down the infrastructure. It wasn't to cause damage for any other reason than to try to get money. Now, when we take and play this forward and look at another attack that was pretty prevalent last year in SolarWinds, this actually was a very sophisticated nation-state-driven attack. The adversary had made penetration into SolarWinds' business and had the ability to impact the actual code that was going into the source code of the SolarWinds product. They were in the environment for a very long time and had this command and control architecture over this impact of the product, and in such a way that the build process never caught it. And so they were signing code that was officially distributed by SolarWinds and that was trusted downstream. So the supply chain at the very top level was attacked. And so software vendors, resellers, upstream cloud vendors all got this code, and then they pushed it out to their customers. And before you know it, we've got very large enterprise businesses, major metropolitan systems and city governments, state and federal governments, and including the financial markets were all impacted with this type of attack. And because of the attack, it was being done very strategically by a very sophisticated, almost limitless resource adversary. It's very hard to defend against that. And so when you think about how you have to deal with ransomware today, there's really kind of three problems that we map into. The first is, sometimes the backups of yesterday are no longer the best line of defense for today. They unfortunately get attacked and impacted usually first in the type of impact. Secondly, being able to understand exactly what was impacted during the event and being able to quickly identify that for recovery is absolutely key. And third, if you do have a good backup still, can you recover fast enough to get your business operational? We see more and more times where customers have maybe a still working backup or have the ability to pull it back from tape, but the time to restore is too great and they end up still paying the ransom. Now, for anybody who's never seen a ransomware attack kind of happen, I'm going to walk you through the kind of stages of it. It's just not the encryption event and it's over. It always starts with some kind of social engineering campaign or distribution campaign, whether it is a phishing attack, weaponized website, somebody's dropped some memory sticks on the front lawn and hope somebody picks it up, plug it into their system. Some way they're going to get in the environment. Once they get in the environment, they're going to establish essentially a command and control architecture that's going to allow them to bring down some helper applications. This is not the actual ransomware. It's the infection code that's going to go along with it. It's going to help them get their tools inside the business and then help them get it embedded. And once they've done that, they will go through and stage the payload, which will actually become the ransomware, but it's not compiled yet. It's not ready to run for the most part on these more sophisticated attacks. And they'll let that sit there dormant, and they want to get it into systems and let it seed. While they're doing that, they're scanning your environment. They've put keyloggers in, they've started capturing credentials, and they're looking to expand the entire attack surface they can. They're also identifying where all the high-value data is in your business. When they have that identified, they're going to start exfiltrating that out. And then they don't move it all at one time because that would be a very large spike of data for most customers. And so they do it slowly over time and make it look like normal user traffic. However, when they finish their damage inside and taking your data out, then they'll kick off the encryption event, and that'll happen typically very quick. And then you'll obviously get presented with that ransom note. So you have to really break the attack chain here to be able to get recovery. And so how do you do that, right? Well, obviously you're going to do defense in depth security. No one product's going to solve it all for you. However, we know for the fact that, the latest and greatest endpoint technology, while it's good and it's great in a lot of areas, things still get through. So if you have a safety blanket, it's got to be your data protection layer. And so really to make your data protection layer as resilient as possible, you have to introduce security at the point of data. And what do I mean by that? You have to have native immutability, which means you have to have guaranteed recoverability. You got to be able to identify where the risks are in your business before they get attacked. So data governance, data classification, and then you can fight back. The adversaries are using artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to attack you. No reason why you can't leverage those same technologies to fight back against them. And so when you look at this new imperative of security first at the data layer, we really are doing three different things. The first is you have to move forward to a new generation data backup platform. You have to have native immutability, you have to have recoverability, you have to have zero trust management built in. Secondly, most customers are embracing the cloud, and as your data moves outside the four walls of the business, you have to be able to manage and monitor that and maintain that same kind of level all the way through the movement to the cloud. And third, you need to wrap your data with the highest security possible, and you need to do it in a way that you don't trust anybody blindly. So zero trust is an absolute requirement in the data layers today, and if you're not doing zero trust all the way to the data management layer, it's almost game over. And the reason for that is if you think about it historically, we used to say we're going to build these firewalls and make our outside exterior very hard to get through. We punch a very small hole, we call it DMZ, and then we put a little guard there saying if you can authenticate with your password, we'll let you in, right? We had the fire-breathing dragon outside, but once you got inside, it was a soft, chewy, gooey center. And as we move forward to today, unfortunately, data doesn't live inside the four walls of the building anymore. It's constantly on the move. We're using SaaS services now. We have cloud services. As if you think about this, what happened this past year with COVID, we moved people out of the business and sometimes did it extremely quick. Remote VPNs, remote data access. Once you expand that surface, you're no longer being able to protect that in one fashion. And so you have to really trust nothing and make people verify to be able to give access to it. And your data is not going to stop moving now. So when you look at it from a perspective of the network layer down to the data layer, we always have built it at the edge and built into it. So perimeter security, network security, endpoint security, application security, using things like sandboxes and endpoint detection response and doing things with signatures and trying to do everything that we can to catch this adversary. However, if they made it through those layers, and they got to the data layer, game is over, right? And the data is the informational gold side of a business. So really what you have to do is you still have to do that same level of defense at the edge, the endpoint application layer, but then you also have to build the cyber resiliency to the data layer. It must converge. You must have it at that layer as well. And if everything else has failed you, this layer better survive because it's going to be your last best chance for recovery. And the problem again with recovery today is really kind of, a couple fold. The first is most backup systems still use open protocols. They're using a backup target, often a disk-to-disk file system that's open over SMB, NFS, S3. And because they're open over that, they're also discoverable over that. And if they can be discovered and enumerated and someone's compromised the credentials, game is over. They're going to be able to take that system out. Secondly, again, blast radius is absolutely key. No matter how big or small the event is, you have to be able to identify what the event was, what was impacted, and then being able to produce that data set to a tool to start driving recovery. And in today's world, with CCPA, GDPR, compliance requirements for different things like SOX and PCI, HIPAA, if you have an event, you have to disclose that. So can you identify the high value data so that you know if it was impacted or not? And if you can identify it, can you get it more securely put in the right location and shrink the attack surface? And lastly, one of the things that we see a lot, unfortunately, is when recovery is happening, it's often slow. And it's not just slow because of technology, it's slow because of the teams inside that have to talk to each other. And if your security ops team and your IT ops team are disconnected and not talking to each other, you don't want them to be meeting for the first time during a ransomware recovery event. So with our approach at Rubrik, we really bring in answers to all these different areas. The first is we give our customers native immutability. We built from the ground up a purpose-built file system that's logically air-gapped, that can never be seen, monitored, or discovered from the network. And it's depend only in fashion, so that data can't be changed if it could be accessed. All data is done to secure to close control access with zero trust. Secondly, we have a solution of suites that sit on top of this layer that give you the ability to understand when suspect activities happen in your environment, both behavioral and adversarial. We use that scoped anomaly detection and be able to then drive remediation. And at the same time, we're cross-correlating that with our rich product that we have called Sonar that does data governance, data classification. So we can bring that sensitive data assessment to the table and bring those two together and say, did I have an event where sensitive data may have been impacted? Now, when you have to drive recovery at scale is absolutely key, and fast recovery is just as important. Leveraging our instant-on technology and the ability to do expert-guided recovery through blueprint orchestration, we can help customers get back to steady state as fast as possible. And oftentimes in a fashion where the team that may be responsible for it may not be available, anybody can kick off this expert-guided recovery. From a native immutability perspective, this just puts it in pictures. If you have an environment that looks like it's on the left, where you have backup servers, proxy servers, data targets, and you're running on open systems or Windows systems, Linux systems, you have a very large attack surface, and that's something that obviously the adversaries look for first. If they can take out the resilience copies before they take out the production environment, game is over. With Rubrik, even though we're network connected, the data repository where we write your data is never connected. It's always logically air-gapped, it's never on the network, and it's only done in a fashion that we write data into it. We never change it, have no modified capability. So we have that really rough, tough exterior. We also have that hard, crunchy inside interior as well, so that it's very much built on the zero trust again throughout. And so when you look at it from today's threat landscape, if you were to have a ransomware event, you're really going to have two different options. You're either going to pay the ransom or you're going to attempt to recover. Everybody's going to take option 2 first, and oftentimes option 2 fails if you're not using a later generation backup product. Now, one of the other things that we see, again, as I was saying earlier, IT ops and infrastructure ops, they have to work with the security team because you're all going to start doing your own pieces of the puzzle, and you have to work together here. IT ops is going to be responsible for getting data back to the business and restoring operations. Again, think about DDR and BC. And then the infrastructure security team is going to be looking at forensics, patient zero, how did they get in, how did they persist? Once you have that piece figured out together, you still have to go through and then drive the recovery. Now, hopefully you have safeguarded backups. If you don't, you're not going to be able to recover. If you have with the safeguarded backup, can you recover timely what you need to, and how long is it going to take you? Those sometimes are not answers that people can get fast, and so they also still pay the ransom. Now with Rubrik and security appointed data, we really take these attack points of the problem statement here and solve them. The first is obviously we're going to give you an immutable backup. All of our customers who've ever run Rubrik who've had an event have been able to recover. We're still batting 1,000. Secondly, we use our API first economy. We cross-connect all the data from the infrastructure team to the security team. So everybody's looking from the same data plane, everybody's looking for the same information, and everybody gets to use their own native tools. And with our radar product, we give you the scope of attack. With Sonar, we give you the ability to have sensitive data discovery. And then with our instant-on capabilities, with our orchestration layer from app flows, we can give you the ability to recover fast. And so customers with us get their data back. Now, when you think about data itself, you have to ask yourself 3 questions. And if you can't answer these questions, you're really already losing the battle. You have to be able to answer what is happening with your data. You need to be able to answer who's accessing your data, and you need to know where sensitive data is where. If you can't answer that, then you need a tool in your environment today to be able to help you give you this visibility. For stronger insights, we have a tool that does this. It runs on top of the backup infrastructure. It works out of band, so there's no impact to production. And it scans the backup after every run, looking for any data that's been added, changed, or deleted that's also got sensitive exposure in it. We take that same data, then feed it into our ML machine learning engines and cross-connect that with the security tools like SIEM and SOAR solutions so that you have cross-visibility to your security team where they want to understand where that information is and if it's being managed right. And then with behavior analytics that are coming, we're going to have the ability to cross-connect the kind of who and when. And so you'll have the 5 Ws of data all in one single pane of glass. Now, if you wanted to take this journey with us, you can come and join us at Rubrik. We started by modernizing legacy data management. That's how we made our name. We actually brought the simplicity to that through automation and API scale economy. We are the leaders in taking data to the cloud and cloud data management, whether that's lift and shift for archiving, if it's lift and shift for, I should say, infrastructure as a service, or if you started cloud first or cloud native and are running things like Office 365, Rubrik's got you covered. But we are pushing the envelope. We are leading the charge in zero trust data management, giving our customers and our prospects the ability to have a defensible layer at that last layer of defense where their critical information is or the informational goal of their business is. And so come take a reimagined data security with us. We give you the always-on data protection with intelligence, orchestrated recovery, information that's going to be used by everybody in the business. And really what you walk away with Rubrik is a complete data management solution that's going to give you complete environment protection, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. And you don't have to take my word for it. We've got numerous customers that have gone through this battle and won, and a lot of them are happy to tell this story. I mean, you got a few on the screen here. Obviously, some of these are more public sector and healthcare, because those are industries where they obviously have to disclose or it's very public about it. But we've had some very high-profile ones this past year that we've been able to help, and we've got great success stories around it. So reach out to us. We'd love to have conversations with you, show you how we can help you as well. But again, if you're not doing operational resiliency, business continuity, planning the day, and you're not cyber testing those plans with a lens of cyber versus DR, you need to start doing that. And my last piece of advice, I know we just finished up the co-fence before this, if you're not phishing human firewalls, you got to go do that because that's the weakest link in any security chain, right? So thank you for the time today. I was glad to be here. I think we'll see if there's any questions that came in. But yeah, I'm glad to have always joined back to Actual Tech Media.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, David. We always enjoy having you as well. So we do have some questions for you coming in from the audience. While we do that, I've just brought up this poll question for everyone out there. It says, what additional info would you like about Rubrik? And I'll leave that up there for you to reply to while we take your questions. So let's see. First question I saw that came in here, David, they're asking about, you mentioned testing cyber resiliency plans. Can you provide some additional detail on, exactly how one goes about creating those plans and testing them? Any additional advice?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, a good cyber recovery plan starts with understanding your business. So if you haven't done a business impact assessment where you understand what your critical applications are, what needs to come back to keep the lights on and keep the revenue going, you got to start there. Once you have that, then you need to go through and either do a tabletop exercise or do live fire, right? You got to have the people that need to be in the room when the event's actually happening pulled to the table. And when we do these with customers, what we typically see is they'll bring the IT team, maybe they'll bring someone from security, but they'll forget about HR, they'll forget about legal, they'll forget about the executive team. All these other people who are going to play a critical piece, including outside counsel and obviously the forensics teams that are going to come into play. So you got to go through that because you have to understand the pain that you're going to go through, or at least think through the pain that you would have because of things you missed. And, from an order of recovery, everybody says, I need to bring back the ERP system and the email system. They always forget about the 101 stuff, DNS, Active Directory, key management systems. So you really got to go through it and you got to game plan it. And it is a game plan. It's a war plan, honestly. And again, it's different than a DR plan because a DR event, what it is, right? Smoking crater, it's a fire, whatever it is. When you have a cyber event, it's a disaster inside a disaster. And you may not know exactly where the disaster is and how long it's been there and exactly who's affecting the disaster. So you've got to have every piece of the people that are going to be responsible for every piece of the attack recovery response trained up. And so if you haven't done it, then do a business impact assessment, write the plan down, give it a dry run, and then exercise it. It's like a fire drill. You got to do it quarterly. And the adversary changes just as fast. So you got to really stay on top of it.
Great advice. Great advice. Let's see, there's a couple other questions here about, kind of what can Rubrik do to help me ensure that my data repository, my backup repository, doesn't become somehow infected with ransomware or isn't somehow copied, leaked
Sure.
to some attackers?
Yeah, great question. So again, our solution set's a little bit different than the rest of the industry. For one, we have a purpose-built file system from the ground up that we wrote that is immutable, and it's doing one thing and one thing only, and that's locking your data up and keeping it safe. The second thing is we layered on that levels of technology that run after every backup that will tell you if there's anything that's adversarial that's happened since the last backup. Whether it's behavioral, you could have somebody in marketing mass delete a lot of files. That's not something normally happens. That'll get flagged. If you had somebody kick off an adversarial event and encrypted data, we'll see that as well. Obviously, that's going to be to give you the pieces that's going to tell you if something bad has happened. And Radar, our product Radar is the first thing it tells you that that's happened. It's already happened, by the way, because Radar is post-deterministic analysis. But that means everything else has already failed you. So you're still going to need us to help you recover, and that's where it's going to accelerate the recovery with the automation workflow engine. The data governance piece of it is just critical, and that's where we bring in the ability to do unstructured data analytics. We have a preset analyzer profile that covers most of the normalized PII, but then we also can extend that to things that may be sensitive in your business that may not be normalized in the industry, and we can help you classify and discover that. And every customer that's ever done a data discovery with us has found sensitive information in some place they didn't expect to see it. So, as far as I'm concerned, that product's still batting 1,000 too. And, it's something I would always recommend customers, even if you're not thinking about it, take the Pepsi challenge, let it store it in your environment, because you're going to get information that you just do not want to see. But, I don't know, or I didn't know about it is no longer a valid answer, especially in today's compliance landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Another question here, they want to know, can Rubrik help me with sort of a runbook automation, like recovery, if we do have a disaster?
Absolutely. We've got two different ways to do it. One is obviously we're an API-first platform, so we've had customers since day one of Rubrik that have orchestrated against us, and we have numerous playbooks for Ansible, Chef, Puppet, whatever your favorite choice of automation framework is. We also have a purpose-built product called AppFlows that we released earlier this year that does exactly that. It's if you want to analog it to SRM or Zerto, it's got those functionality features in it, but it's got way more in it because it has the ability to be proactively used as well. So you can use it not only for recovery and mass recovery at scale, you can use it to build cyber ranges where you can bring on production copies of environments and then offensively test against that from a security perspective. You have the ability to also do migrations with planned lift and shift and then doing that final sync. And then it does give you the ability to build the blueprint in such a way that maybe the person who is responsible for it on a day-to-day basis isn't available, but anybody who has the right authorization can go in and run that book, and that will take care of it at an automated scale so that they don't necessarily have to understand every one of the steps. They just have the rights to invoke those steps.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like that could be really powerful to get companies back up and running, rapidly if there was some sort of ransomware attack. Another question here, what about the deployment of Rubrik, or at least trying it out, a proof of concept type of thing?
Sure.
What do you recommend? What's the easiest way to do that?
A couple different ways. One is obviously we're not shy. We'll qualify a proof of value with you and deploy it in your environment. We're software defined, so we can deploy it on any kind of commodity hardware that's certain bill of materials. We also have the ability to host you, and we can bring you our virtual labs, and then we do various events throughout the year called Camp Rubriks, where you can kind of get the speed dating version of it. But all those are possible. All you need to do is reach out to us. We'll be happy to arrange that. We'll qualify it with you, and then we'll fit the right solution for you in terms of testing. But yeah, we're not shy. We're happy to put our product through the paces, and I encourage anybody to reach out. Honestly, we have the ability to do that. And if you're in the cloud or doing cloud first, it's even easier because we don't have to deploy any software for that. It's all orchestrated at an API level. So if you want to experience managed backup for Office 365 or infrastructure as a service protection, reach out and we'll be happy to connect you there as well. And all those solutions are also available in the major cloud hypervisor marketplaces.
Awesome. Well, David, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but it's been great having you back on. Always good to chat with you. Thanks for being here.
Same here, Dave. Thank you very much. And have a great day, everyone.
And I encourage everyone to respond there to the poll question. I'll leave that up while I announce our first prize winner. We have an Amazon $500 gift card. This one's going to Richard Yoki, I believe is how you say it. Richard Yoki from Texas. Congratulations, Richard. We'll reach out to you to deliver that gift card. All right, 2 more gift cards still on the event today, and don't forget about our best question prizes as well. It's another great way to be entered into a gift card drawing. But let's go ahead and keep the EcoCast moving here. I'm excited to bring in now our next presenter on today's EcoCast. Welcome Wade Woolwine, Principal Operational Program Manager at Rapid7. Wade, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much.
Great to have you, Wade. Take it away.
All right, thank you. So to decode the very strange title that I have, I'm part of Rapid7's internal information security team, and my job is to really make sure that the various components that make up our security program are working well together. So today we're going to focus really on the security awareness program, and one thing that we are not here to discuss is either spear phishing testing or your annual security training. I am biased as a career incident responder, but I don't think those things are working very well. So instead, we're going to talk a little bit about what I've seen work in my experience in my job directly at Rapid7, but also in my consulting career in the many, many years that I was in the field and helping customers out with oftentimes their worst possible day, the day of a breach. So first and foremost, we have to set the stage properly because everyone doesn't need the Rolls-Royce of security awareness programs or the Ferrari of security awareness programs, whatever your fancy vehicle of choice may be. It really needs to be right-sized for the business. You can't just throw spearfish testing. You can't just throw annual security awareness testing. Cutting edge programs will typically talk about identity theft and the various aspects of that. Other organizations will roll that into their spearfish testing, but ultimately your program needs to fit your business drivers. And in order to really answer, skip the slide a little bit too far. In order to really answer those questions, your executives, your leadership team, your management team really needs to have a good idea of what risks are posed to the organization. I've responded to incidents, primarily ransomware incidents, where the organization was like, no, it's fine, just reimage all the machines and we'll move forward. We don't have any data that is of interest. Meanwhile, I've worked with security programs in banks who literally have to dot every I and cross every T and provide documentation saying that they've done so. So it's critically important that the beginning of the security awareness program starts with the enterprise risk management program so that executives can really understand what the impact of a potential breach is. For organizations who do deal in sensitive data, financial data, PII, health information, other sorts of data that can be sold on the black market, well, you need to put a price tag to that. You need to understand not just the legal and kind of financial repercussions of losing customer data, but you also need to factor in the reputational damage that a breach might cause. We have seen, I think all of us in the last several years, breaches that didn't necessarily result in tremendous financial loss did result in pretty significant reputational loss. And of course, that is a cost that our business leaders have to take into account when they're devising how they want their organization to behave around sensitive data. And it's not just restricted to sensitive data. I have done incident response activities in organizations where their technology and the availability of their technology was everything that drove their business. So if an attacker should disrupt that technology, should the technology being unavailable would result in not meeting the SLAs that you've contractually agreed to with your customers, that's also a business impact. So it's not just about the loss of the data, the legal implications that come with that. It's also about making sure that your technology remain available for your customers, SLA or not. If your product isn't available, it's very unlikely that you'll have repeat buyers for that particular product. So you have to evaluate the various impacts that can come as a result of a cyber incident, a cyber breach, and use those to drive the importance of your security awareness program. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about what a security awareness program might look like, considering that your business does have something to lose in a breach. And very strange, my colleagues in incident response often laugh at me. I always start with policy, because if you can't set the rules to the game, well, you can't expect that your employees are going to intuitively know what to do. You can't necessarily assume that your employees know exactly what sensitive data is, where that sensitive data is stored, how that sensitive data should be handled in order to protect it from unseeing eyes. And so that's why I start with the data classification and handling policy as the #1 policy that any organization should be writing in their security policy stack. Define the data types, define their classification level, and define how you want people to handle them, from encryption during electronics transmission to encryption at rest to not making copies, not printing copies. There's a whole slew of different controls that you can apply in data classification, from the very lightweight with high, medium, and low, and defining the data types there, to the very, very complex, which I've encountered most often in governments. Directly following your policy on data classification, data handling should be your acceptable use. Again, you have to set expectations with your users, and your users, I mean your employees in your organization, if you are going to expect them to uphold any sort of security as they're going through their day-to-day jobs. Security is very difficult. It's time-consuming. It's an extra step that everyone has to take in most of the tasks that we perform every day. And so you really have to set those rules in order for people to understand what is expected of them. And further, when you set rules, you also need to set consequences. I won't get too sociological or psychological here, but a rule without a consequence is well, essentially just a suggestion. And in security, we can't live with just suggestions. We have to make sure that people understand the severity of violating one of these policies, because the net is that you might be costing the organization billions of dollars in losses. So having risk tolerances defined, that includes the potential negative repercussions of not following the policy and the rules, and you also have to take into account mitigations. What processes, may they be technology processes or human processes, do you have in place in order to help meet that risk tolerance level? And of course, you have to make sure that you have an incident response policy. And this is not just that dusty incident response policy that's probably sitting on everyone's shelves. When I say incident response policy, I actually mean the defined steps that you follow in the event of an incident. Incident response policies cannot be vanilla. They have to be very much crafted for the particular threat scenarios that you expect your organization to face. These things need to be rehearsed way more than annually. Usually quarterly is probably a better exercise in reviewing your incident response policies along with a tabletop exercise, because again, you are doing a ton of work in setting the expectations for how people are going to behave in the heat of the moment. So quickly summarizing, policy is very, very, very important. If you have no other policies in your stack, these 4 should be the ones that you have. They should be very clearly written. They should be very clearly communicated. And quite frankly, they should be discussed at all levels of the organization. It can't just be an annual thing where you scroll through just to trick the technology into believing that you actually read the policy before you hit the I accept button. These documents are extremely important, and in order for employees to consider them important. Leadership and management needs to consider them important. You need to talk about them regularly, and so on and so forth. I'm actually getting ahead of myself in another slide. So let's keep moving with information security, data security, cybersecurity. It's cultural. Again, performing your job in a secure manner takes additional work. That paradigm is true for the non-technical user just as much as the technical user. It's not just up to those security geeks or those IT geeks or those developer geeks or those DevOps geeks to uphold security. It's up to everybody else, because I will tell you that in the, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of breaches that I have responded to, in maybe 5% of the cases, it was the super user that was targeted. In the other 95% of the cases, it was just an employee or just a set of employees. Once the attacker was able to fool those particular people, they were able to move around the environment, take on additional permissions and things like that. But the initial target was not a technical user. So it's critically important for everyone in the organization to subscribe to this security paradigm. And I emphasize it being cultural because, well, you know, we all have difficult jobs. We all have expectations that are set of us. We all want to go home and have a family life after we're done working. And I'm not saying that to say that we do the bare minimum, but at the end of the day, if we are expecting folks to go the additional mile to take security into consideration for every step of their job, we need to make sure that that behavior is encouraged, that employees who are demonstrating that they are doing their job, upholding the policies that we talked about earlier, are rewarded for doing so. It needs to be part of compensation. It needs to be part of the expectations that every boss has for their employee. It needs to be part of the expectations that your CEO has for all of their direct reports and their direct reports, and so on and so forth throughout the organization. One of my good friends is Kurt. We work together in a research capacity. He said, look, the first step for any engineering team to start taking security seriously is to say the word security during their Scrum meetings. And it's so incredibly simplistic, but it is very exemplary of how we just have this expectation that the guys and gals in the hoodies who are constantly in front of their computers are somehow going to magically protect us from the attackers. And that's just not the case. We do everything that we can. We deploy a lot of technology. We really try to stack the deck in our favor. But at the end of the day, we security people have the expectation that everybody within the organization is treating security like we do as part of our job. So security is cultural. That is one of the things that I spend most of my time explaining to executive teams in customer environments in my consulting work, that security has to come from the top. You can't naturally assume that it's going to emerge because you've done your annual pen testing, as well as your annual spear phishing, as well as your annual security awareness training. We all sleep through those. I'm not ashamed to admit it. We all sleep through them, click through them, listen to them, try to get through them as quickly as possible so that we can go back to the job that we get paid for. Let's make security part of the job that we are all paid for. Now, back in the camp of things that security teams should be doing for our executives, for our employees, that is the threat landscape awareness. There's so much going on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis in the threat landscape, and it is incumbent upon us security people to inform our peers within the organization of what's going on, what to expect, what are the tips and tricks, what is the latest vulnerability, and why should you care about it. It's our job to make sure that we are clarifying and simplifying this crazy stuff that's going on in the deep dark web, as my father would call it, all that crazy hacker stuff that I don't understand, as he would say. He's an executive, by the way, so I spent a lot of time educating him in the hopes that his organization won't get breached. Dovetailing off of that, I personally feel that it's important for employees of the organization to understand what the potential vulnerabilities are. And I use the term vulnerability very loosely, not necessarily in the technical sense, but where are our weaknesses? Where are attackers likely to come at us? Every security team knows what those weaknesses are, and we guard that with the, secrecy of the NSA or something like that. And I just don't understand that behavior, because at the end of the day, the more people know about the problems that we have, the more likely they are to get resolved. Squeaky wheel gets the oil. It happens every single time. So the more people know about the weaknesses, the more apt they are able to rally behind potential fixes, but also the more apt they are to not stick their foot in the hole as they're walking around trying to do their job. So understanding where the weaknesses are allows our employees, the folks that we are expecting to uphold the security assurance, allow them to understand how to not get in trouble, because now they know where the cracks are in the floor, or the foundation is missing, or whatever analogy you want to come up with. And then last but not least, for organizations that really, I say specialized training, and what I really mean here is that engineers, software engineers, should get training, security training that is specific to their software engineering role. They shouldn't just, everyone shouldn't be getting the same annual security training, because we expect developers to operate differently than IT administrators, to operate differently than the folks that administer all of the cloud applications that we use. So everyone needs a different set of information in order to do their job securely, and it is on the organization to be able to identify those specialized training needs, specialized training resources. I'm not saying that you need to pay $5,000 for SANS training for every single one of your developers. There's a reason why there's seniority in technical roles. You send your leads, you send your principals, you send your seniors to go get that training. They are the ones who are most likely going to be able to absorb the most content, most likely to be able to get the most out of that training. And then they come back and then they train your organization. They train the other developers on their teams. They train the other developers in the organization. They start writing policy around the expectations that are set within the development organization for how to code securely. So you invest $5,000, $10,000 in sending a couple people to this highly advanced training, and if you do things right, if you have the right people, they come back and they train everybody else. So you've multiplied your investment countless amounts by following this model. But at the end of the day, if your organization is serious about security, they understand the impact of the breach, you need to attack the weaknesses from all fronts. And those aren't just technical weaknesses, but those are also knowledge gaps. And so specialized training becomes very, very important in that context. All right. So this is where I give our users a little bit of a pass, because most security programs that I go into say, oh yeah, no, we trust that our end users are going to do the right thing. And so I mean, I love people, I trust people, but ultimately I don't trust your end users to do the right thing, even if they have gone through their annual security training program, and even if they didn't fall for the spear phishing now. It is absolutely critical that security teams are working to sometimes protect the users from themselves, but mostly protect the users from attackers. We know, based on the work that we do, based on the threat reports, the public threat reports that are out there, like the Verizon DBIR, that the end user is the target, and it is most likely going to come through spear phishing. And in the modern ecosystem, the most likely impact of that particular spear phish is going to be credential theft for a system that harbors the critical information that your organization holds. So doubling down in email protection is going to, it's not going to eliminate all of the threats. I'm not saying that technology is the silver bullet here, but it is going to significantly reduce the number of potentially bad decisions that your users are going to make on a daily basis. So let me exemplify that. I have been a Google Mail customer since is Google Mail out of beta? I'm not even sure. Anyways, I've been a Google Mail customer for an exceptionally long time, and Google has invested a ton in spam protection and malware defenses and all sorts of security features. And I actually remember when they turned those features on, I went from getting hundreds of spam messages a day to, maybe getting 30 and then down to 20 and then 10. And then I'm lucky if I see a spam message in a week these days. And so what I'm saying here is that for critical systems like your email, like your instant messaging, like your communal platforms, as I'll call them, for the business. This includes Salesforce and all the other kind of SaaS-based applications that are out there. It is critically important that you select technology that is going to help secure your users. Don't run your own Exchange server anymore. Please don't run your own Exchange server anymore. Go get a SaaS product that offers all sorts of security bells and whistles on top of that. Double down on endpoint technology that is able to look into the user's browsers and the user's email clients. Getting back to server side, deploy some sort of filtering technology in front of your email system that will uphold a lot of the security standards that have been set regarding authenticity and digital signatures and things like that as it relates to email. What I'm basically saying is really try to invest in reducing the number of opportunities that a user would have to make a bad decision, and do that through technology. Focus on email, focus on web browsing, focus on the endpoint, and then of course focus on misconfiguration. I can't tell you the number of times we have read articles in the past few years saying, oh my goodness, such and such insurance provider or healthcare provider, some data was left on an unsecured cloud-based storage platform for any old person to just walk by and pick up and walk away with. You need to expect that people are going to make mistakes. If you just think about yourself, we make mistakes every day as human beings, whether that be in our jobs, our personal lives, whatever it may be. We make mistakes. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality of it. And we can use technology in order to minimize the impacts of those mistakes. We can use misconfiguration auditing in order to identify when an administrator has inadvertently opened up a public S3 bucket or whatever the GCP and Azure equivalents are. We can use that technology in order to minimize the blast radius associated with those mistakes. So really, if you're looking for a methodology for how to deploy your threat prevention technology, think about it in the context of minimizing the opportunity for people to make mistakes, and then also minimizing the blast radius associated with people making mistakes. We just really need to look at the threat landscape to understand where that is. It's going to come through email, it's going to come through the web browser, and it's going to come through misconfigurations of SaaS-based platforms that all businesses are using. And then the focus on the endpoint, of course, because all of that, minus the SaaS piece, all of the web browsing, all of the email threats, all of that comes to a head at the endpoint. And with our world nowadays, where we're all working from home, staring at my two dogs right now, us security people need the visibility all the way down to the endpoint. I don't know if a particular user is sitting in a coffee shop or sitting at their house, or if that login from Russia is actually them or someone who has phished their credentials. So being on the endpoint allows us that visibility that we have lost in the last couple of years of not having people in offices like they have been in the past. So kind of wrapping up and in quick summary, tying everything together, first establish what your risk profile is going to be, what the rules are, the things that you're worried about from a business perspective. This should be coming from your executives, mind you. This isn't an exercise that the security team can do on their own. We need to understand what our business people are worried about, what our executives are worried about, and we need to build our security programs, including security awareness, around that. Set the rules, write all of the policy, make sure that you have those expectations documented. It also serves great purpose for identifying potential weaknesses in the broader security program. I love when my customers, my team members write stuff down because I get to digest it at my own leisure, at my own speed. I can be critical of it, and it helps us identify weaknesses in our program when the program is written down on paper. Setting people up for success, so providing the adequate cultural importance of security, making sure that everyone understands how to make security part of their job, make it part of your performance expectations for anyone at the company. Again, the way that you do your job within the way to do your job securely is not just the responsibility of security people. It's the responsibility of everyone in the organization. If the organization has something that they care about that they don't want to have lost to an attack, make sure that you're providing the specialized training when that training is needed. And then, of course, make sure that you are supplementing, make sure that you are using technology in order to most effectively reduce the instance of mistakes made on the job, whether that be for the end user, whether that be for the technical user. Sitting down and walking through business processes, understanding how people are doing their jobs, and being able to audit and inform a more secure way of doing the job is always going to be beneficial. So I managed to do all of that without suggesting that anyone go out and do spear phishing or security annual awareness training. Look, I can't tell you not to do those things. One, because a lot of regulations call for it, but two, I have seen people's interests get piqued by what we're doing today in security awareness, by what most of the industry is doing today in security awareness. But it's not enough. Again, if your company, if your friend's company, your dad's company is serious about mitigating the impacts of a potential cyber breach, then it needs to be cultural. Everyone needs to care about security. Everyone needs to drive for security. So yeah, that is the content that I had prepared. Oh, trying to click buttons here. There we go. I am happy to take any questions. Fire away.
Excellent. Yeah, great presentation. You make a great point there that security has to be cultural. It's not something that we can just stamp out our fist and say, boom, security's done. So we do have some questions for you from the audience, Wade. First question I wanted to ask you, and of course I want to remind everyone about the poll question that's there on the screen. We do want your feedback on that. First question I wanted to ask you is specifically around Rapid7. How can Rapid7 help organizations with endpoint visibility?
Sure. So we have this wonderful product called InsightIDR. It was XDR before XDR was XDR, as I like to say. So we had this premise that, of course, logs and endpoint data should exist in the same platform so that we can ask all these questions. So we have that bit of technology which gives us visibility into the endpoint through our endpoint agent. Now, it's called InsightIDR, but this agent actually works across our portfolio. So not only will the agent allow you to identify threats as they materialize within your environment, but if you're also using InsightVM, which is our vulnerability management platform, you will be able to do that misconfiguration audit that I was talking about a couple slides ago. So that endpoint agent for us is an extremely valuable tool. Not only are we able to tell you what your attack surface looks like, but we're able to tell you when that attack surface has been breached. So that's how we can help on the endpoint side.
Excellent. Yeah, that's so important because that's where I know a lot of breaches tend to happen, is on the endpoint. Another question here, also on Rapid7, do Rapid7 solutions enable cloud configuration assessments?
Yes, they absolutely do. So one of the areas that Rapid7 has really been expanding into is that cloud configuration assessment. Cloud configuration assessment is such an interesting term because we assume that it's all cloud, but it's a combination of network and endpoint and cloud-specific configuration. So, excuse me, it's almost a representation of the old model of enterprise, where everything was in a data center, but with the added complexity of having to understand how to configure those assets for that particular vendor. So within inside VM, we have some modules that allow you to audit the security configurations. And last year, Rapid7's been on a little bit of an acquisition tear, so I lose track, but we purchased this company named DivvyCloud, and their specialization is very much in the cloud configuration security assessment across multiple platforms. So right now, it's still available as DivvyCloud rebranded to Rapid7's Insight CloudSec, I believe. I'm not the marketing guy on the call, but that particular piece of technology, as it evolves, as it grows into our platform, will become more available across the products. But as it stands today, it's a really great tool. We use it as part of our internal security stack here at Rapid7. We have a huge amount of appreciation for what those guys have done.
Very cool. Yeah, sounds like a great tool that could help a lot of companies out there. Let's see. It looks like we're running out of time here in our live Q&A, but I'm afraid we're going to have to get back to some of these folks electronically who ask questions. But Wade, it's been really great having you on. Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And for more information on Rapid7, check out the Handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a link to download the PDF resource entitled 2021 Cloud Misconfiguration Report by Rapid7 Research, just published this month. It's a 12-page report, tons of statistics in here, really well done. Make sure that you check out this report and download it before you go. And with that, it's now time for our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited now to introduce you to Zoe Lindsay, who is a security strategist at Duo. Zoe, thanks for being on the event again.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining today. I will preface this with a warning. Please strap in. I've doubled up on coffee, and my goal here is to go through what is typically about a 45-minute training with you in just over 20 minutes. So hang on. Here we go. Today, I am going to be talking with you about why you should encourage your users to go dox yourself. We're going to talk about how to help keep yourself safer through a security mindset. Now, I think at the outset here, it's useful for us to define what we're talking about. When I say that, it can be a little bit controversial, I think. So what do you mean by dox? Dox comes from originally documents, which then became just docs, which became just docs. The idea here being that this is where research is done either as part of the recon element of a larger hack or as an end in itself to obtain or publish information about someone. But it is the process of investigating a user or an individual and trying to find and typically publicize information about them. Now, as we go through today, you'll notice that I am not going to tell you to air all your dirty laundry online. So there are some purists that may say, actually, that isn't doxing. I think that it's close enough for our purposes, and I think that it helps for us to communicate with our end users in words, in language or vocabulary that they're going to understand, as something that has become popularized in discussions around the media over the last several years. I think this is an accessible term that is close enough to what we actually want to inculcate in our users. Just a couple examples of well-known or sort of landmark doxing instances. In 2005 was really the first kind of widely popularized doxing published or covered as such. And this was when Paris Hilton's Sidekick got breached. This got a ton of coverage because there was a lot of phone numbers, private phone numbers, and texts for celebrities that had gotten released as a result of this. In the initial coverage, the suggestion was that Paris had set her dog's name, pictured here, Tinkerbell, as her password. Actually, it was the answer to her password reset question. Just another little reminder that we don't want to rely on knowledge-based questions as our quote-unquote second factor. But this resulted in something that we see when individuals or those that are the face of an organization get doxxed. There was a massive loss of trust. And it took years, really, for Paris to begin to rehabilitate her image and start to make headway in the public again. Something a little bit closer to what we're probably dealing with day in and day out. There's a great article from 2012 by journalist Matt Honan, where he gives a really good breakdown, step by step, of how pretty much his entire digital life got compromised in a matter of an hour through a domino effect of personal information being used about him to capture more information and gain access to more accounts. I really encourage you to go and check out this article. There's a really good example here where semi-private data, in this instance, the last 4 digits of a card that he used for an Amazon purchase, was sent in the receipt for his purchase, which then was used as a measure of identity verification when the attackers called Apple. So we've got a couple of elements here that are all coming to play. We're seeing the weakness of knowledge-based account security. We're also seeing how information that may be only kept semi-private in some arenas can actually be used as the keys to the kingdom to expand access elsewhere. This is not an uncommon tactic during doxing events. So you may be saying to yourself, I'm not a celebrity or a major journalist. Who's going to want to dox me? The answer is it might just be an accident. I always try and stay away from fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so I want to stress here that someone getting accidentally doxed and shot is not something that happens regularly, but it has happened. And there have been less severe instances of the wrong target, arguably any target of doxing is the wrong target, but the person who is not intended to be targeted suffering the brunt of those effect of that doxing. This is something to keep in mind because you don't just need to be a CEO. You don't just need to be the person that's able to write the company checks. It can also happen for more petty reasons. For example, you could just be a woman going online. There's a somewhat recent study finding that more than 3/4 of women under 30 have experienced harassment online. One of the very common ways that women are harassed online is through investigation or publication of their private photos and private information. This is certainly not a comprehensive overview of all the ways or reasons why people get doxxed. We've seen it done for purposes of bullying, especially in an academic setting, for blackmail or humiliation, as another method of domestic or sexual abuse, for retaliation, recon for a larger attack, for profit, to get access to financial information. And unfortunately, sometimes the hardest to address because there isn't a motive really to target, just for their own amusement and making somebody's life harder. So, all right, sure, I might get doxxed, but this all sounds like horrible and a lot of work. So why would I want to do this to myself? Here's why I argue that you should do this process for yourself. And it goes back to an example that Bruce Schneier shared on his blog where he was talking about a professor that he knew trying to teach the concept of the security mindset to his class. And so the exercise that he gave them was to go into their lives and before the next class, think about some process or situation with which they were going to interact. And rather than trying to navigate that process or situation as instructed or as the typical process would be done, to instead try and apply a security mindset. Instead of thinking the way that it should be done, look for the side door, look for the loophole, look for the back door. See if there is a way that this process can be subverted within the constraints that you've been given. And the example that one of the students gave was that they dropped their car off for some repairs at the dealership. They were given the paperwork for their car, and they said, the service desk said, hey, when you come back, if you don't have the paperwork, don't worry about it. Just give us your last name and we'll get your car. And the student said, on the one hand, immediately their thought was, great, I'm terrible at keeping paperwork. If I lose this, I'll be able to get back. But then their second thought was, so this means that if somebody knows my car is here and they know my name, they can get a free car. And so that's an example of the security mindset, looking at things not as they're intended to work, but trying to evaluate the ways that they might break and what the effects of that may be. So we can apply this idea to that semi-private information that I was talking about before. In isolation, users tend to think of the trees when they're participating online, and not the forest that is made up of each of those individual trees. When we're talking about going online, their thought may be only on the Facebook quiz that they're completing, when in reality, they've got a graduation announcement that has their unmarried name. There's public photos of them out there posted by their friends with geotags. They have friends who post photos and check-ins that have lower privacy settings than they do. They use the same username across different services, and so their Steam activity or their wish lists are available for somebody that goes to look. Now, none of these are specifically really what you would consider PII, but in aggregate, it really starts to develop a pretty complete profile of a person, giving you some hints of ways that they could be targeted for a spearfish. If you see that they've got that new Nintendo Switch on their wish list, you can target them specifically with a promotional campaign to respond to a survey and get a free Switch. So what does this process look like? When we talk about shrinking your footprint, so when we talk about this in terms of, I love that line break there, oops. When we talk about shrinking your footprint in terms of recycling, we talk about reduce, reuse, and recycle. I think that we can apply that same sort of acronym to the idea of reducing your digital footprint, except you're going to review, remove, and restrict. And I'm going to beat somebody to it. They're going to say, actually, that's a mnemonic, not an acronym. You're right, absolutely. Technically right is the best kind of right. Now, when we talk about reviewing, I'm going to suggest that you go through and start by sitting down and writing out a list of the accounts that you know of, the accounts that you use on a regular basis, especially those that may have more sensitive information. You're also going to do a review of public records, your privacy settings, the third-party applications that you've shared access to your various accounts with for integrations or API uses. You're going to review where you can have some privacy removal done and what's shared by others. Now, this is a rabbit hole that you can almost endlessly go down, and there's levels to this search. We're going to start with the stuff that's really obvious and that's most damaging. Your addresses, phone numbers, emails, and common usernames, your date of birth. You've got a huge advantage over an attacker here because hopefully you know a lot of this going in. You know yourself and you know the contact methods and accounts that you regularly use. But after that, you want to consider what information is out there about your parents or siblings, your school, where you've worked, what is shared about you on public social media, not behind your privacy filters. Where have you been mentioned in the press? What information is out there or news coverage is out there about classmates and colleagues? Where have you been publicly tagged? Have your passwords been in any of the very, very large password dumps out there? And then we can get really sort of esoteric and think about reverse image searching, and if you use the same profile picture everywhere, even with different usernames, or where you've been tagged in social media. If there are tracking pixels sent to you in an email, that can provide some intel about where you open or access that email. Toilet paper orientation actually doesn't relate to anything. I just put that in there to see if you were paying attention. So start by making a list, check it twice, start with your offline data, emails and usernames, your handles, your public and private social affiliations, and geotag data or IP data that you might have shared out there. Once we've started to build that list, we're going to cancel some of those inactive accounts, opt out of the common data brokers, and apply for some privacy removals where available. I don't just want you to think about having strong, secure passwords. You also want to consider the third-party apps that have access to your accounts. These are social media games or quizzes. This could be site logins using your social media login info through like an OIDC, browser extensions that you've installed and allowed access to view what you're entering or viewing on a website, and API connections or shortcut services if you're using something like IFTTT. All of these are effectively a house key. And you want to make sure that those house keys are, you know who has them, and you limit them to only who really needs them. You also want to think about the accounts that you haven't thought about. You probably have some abandoned accounts that you set up at some point in the past and haven't had occasion to use for a long time. Well, those are still out there, and in the event of a breach, if you're sharing that password elsewhere, if there's private information about you on there, if you share that username elsewhere, that info can still be captured by an attacker. So you can flush those accounts using some of the services that are listed here. Don't worry about trying to write all of these down. There is a resource handout that will also have those links. Finally, we're going to restrict. I want to emphasize here that I think that it's easy to come away from this presentation thinking, my God, the internet is terrifying. I'm never going online again. That's not reasonable for any of us. Myself, first of all, I'm a child of the internet. What I advocate for is being conscious and mindful about what you're sharing and where, not to not participate in the digital space, but to get your users thinking more holistically about the information about themselves that they share and who the audience for that information is. And going through a process like this, seeing what is out there about them already, can anchor this in a really visceral way that helps change that mindset and make them both more proactive and better armed to protect their privacy in the future. When we talk about restricting, I like to split things into channels. Specifically, I like to split email into channels. I like to delegate based on the sensitivity of information and not get too terribly attached to them. I tend to split my email communication into the following channels. Again, we are restricting access. This is the same principle of least permissions that we apply to access controls for systems. We're just doing it with our own information. So I have a recovery email that I use for nothing else. When I have to have a backup account for password reset, this is the email that I use for that, and I use it for no other purpose. Then I have my high priority email. This is health information, financial information, so forth. I limit where I'm using that only to where it is absolutely necessary. I treat this the same as I would my credit card information or my social security card. Then I have my social email. A major function of email is making sure that the people who you want to find, you can. And so having an email that you share with friends, that you use when networking, that allows you to be found by the folks that you want to have that email, this is a great place to do that. Just keep in mind that inevitably this is going to get scraped, and so you are going to get an amount of spam there. But if you're conscious and mindful of who you give this to and when, you can still help maintain a better signal-to-noise ratio. And finally, you're going to have to sign up for a newsletter now and then. You're going to have to sign in to make a comment on a website. These are things that you may never go back to. I use a low-priority email for this. It ends up being an oversized spam filter most of the time, but on the rare occasion that I need to check it, it keeps from cluttering up my other inboxes. You want to be mindful of where you're having a cookie share. There's some great tools like AdBlock and Origin, uOrigin that you can use that are detailed in the guide. I apologize. I'm really kind of flying through here. Be mindful of what you're sharing on social media. There's information in that resource doc about how you can limit not only your audiences for future posts, but for those that you've made in the past as well, along with seeing your profile as others would see it. Who can see your password? Probably a lot of folks. If you go back to this forest of ideas and we really start to zoom in on the background there, we see one of those things out there is the same password you've used since making an email account in 7th grade for your Jinkos Forever at Netscape.com email address. When we look at things like the RockU 2021 password breach file that put out, oh gosh, it was over, I don't have the stat in front of me, it was over 7 billion passwords with 6 and some odd billion people on the planet. One of your old passwords is in that breach. If you're using that password across other accounts, those accounts are vulnerable. Go check these things out and be mindful of not repeating passwords wherever you're able to. So you're going to review, you're going to remove, you're going to restrict, and finally, you're going to pass it on. You're going to do this on a semi-regular basis. You're going to revise this as on a semi-annual or an annual basis because you're going to continue to participate online, and inevitably there's going to be some more information about yourself that's going to get out there. If you make this a routine instead of a one-time effort, you'll reap better rewards. Also, tell your friends, tell your family. If you hear them getting phishing emails, share this information with them. We are stronger together. The more that we're able to keep each other secure and pass this information out to those that may not work as closely with information security as we do, the better a position we are in to help prepare them and keep ourselves safer because we're not only vulnerable through our own channels, but also through the channels of those that are connected to us. So really, no, go dox yourself. Check out that resource. I would love to move over and see if we've got any questions.
Wow, awesome presentation, Zoe. I just downloaded the resource. I've got it saved. I'm going to follow along and do this myself because this is really cool and really important as well, and something we need to spread the word about with our users, in the organization. So great presentation. We do have some questions for you. I'm just going to bring up a poll question for everyone out there in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about Duo? And so first question I wanted to ask you, Zoe, they said, my phone rings 100 times a day, no matter how many numbers I block. Do you have any advice on what I can do to reduce my profile for text and phone scam attempts?
There's a couple of things that you can do. You can duplicate the same thing of multiple channels for email, for phone numbers as well. There are services like Google Voice that'll let you have a separate phone number, either one that you can dedicate to just using for recovery, or that you can use for your close contact list and help filter some of those others out. There's also some really great call screening apps and services out there. I use one myself. I don't want to make an individual app recommendation because I'm not sure what your specific needs are, but I would encourage you to check out on your mobile app store spam blocking or call screening. There are a few different reputable apps out there to help with that because, yeah, it's ringing off the hook all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, great advice. Okay. Let's see, another question. Isn't giving this kind of information to users dangerous? What if they're bad actors or they have an inside threat?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because there is, even when we kind of lampoon the idea amongst ourselves, there is still that initial impulse to try and achieve security through obscurity. But if we go a step past that, and think about the folks that are motivated, the folks that are bad actors, they've already got this information. They're going and looking for this information, and there's hugely sophisticated networks of folks more than happy to help provide resources to a brand new attacker to help them more efficiently prey on somebody else. By arming users with this information, we can let them know how easy so this information can be to find and help them avoid falling prey to those tactics in the future. I like to think that, if you anchor it, if people can actually, you can tell somebody how safe something is, and they may remember it. You can show somebody how safe something is, and they're more likely to remember it. If you have somebody try how safe something is, I think that they're going to internalize that a lot better. And so that's why I think, even though this is dangerous information in that it can cause real harm, I think that there is a net benefit in showing it to our users so that they can better protect themselves in and outside of the workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. Let's see, another question. There's a lot of information, they say, on how to avoid being doxxed, but what if it happens? What can someone who's already been doxxed do? Any advice?
Yeah. So first, take a deep breath. Know that it is something that you will be able to get through. There's some best practices. You want to file a report. A lot of times that's going to be necessary if you, say, have to make an insurance claim or something later. If somebody were to, say, try and take out a home loan in your name, they're probably going to need to have some evidence that you had a identity theft happen. There are a couple of mentions in the resource doc to data privacy help sites for the various search providers, especially if you are based in the EU and protected by GDPR. Those are, in some cases, resources that are not available to the general public, but are only available to you for those sites to help remove you if you've had an incident. So I would encourage you to check out those resources, and I would encourage you still go through this process. You may not be able to identify how you were found, but you also may find a couple of possibilities, and I think that it will still bring you some peace of mind being able to close those doors.
Excellent advice. I'm afraid we're out of time here on our live Q&A, but again, fantastic presentation, Zoe. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
And I just downloaded the Go Docs Yourself resource there from Duo in the Handouts tab. I encourage everyone to do that as well. Save it and review that after the event. See what you can do to learn more about this and to help prevent this kind of thing for yourself and for your end users as well. All right, so I'll leave up the poll question for everyone to respond to there while I announce our next prize winner. We have another Amazon $500 gift card, and this one is going out to Kartik J. Arman. Kartik J. Arman from California. Congratulations. Kartik J. Arman will reach out to you with that prize. All right, and with that, it's now time to move on to our next presenter on today's EcoCast. I'm excited now to bring in Mr. Frank Yu, Principal Application Experience Architect at Kemp. Frank, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here. Thank you for having me on.
Great to have you, Frank. Take it away.
Thank you very much. And let me just go ahead and move to my first slide here. And the title of this is Where's Waldo? Security Awareness Through Network Detection and Response. And I bring this up because we're talking, and you saw with the synopsis of this session here, that it's all about trying to circumvent the issues and problems that we have with the human element in terms of network security and managing security. And this is a huge piece. We know that networks break and security fails because of human error. And what can we do to mitigate that? And there's a lot of things that we can do, but the first thing we need to do is we need to get good data. We need to get good information. We need visibility. So that's what I want to talk about today, is the visibility into the network to understand where the security threats are, what they are, and how we can manage them before they get to a point that they overwhelm us or they encrypt our hard drives or whatever the case may be. So what is network detection and response? NDR. It enables organizations to monitor network traffic for malicious actors and suspicious behavior and react and respond to the detection of cyber threats to the network. What do I mean? I mean, again, we need that visibility. We need to monitor. We need the surveillance to be able to understand what is happening on our network so that we can then take appropriate actions. And the problem is that a lot of these tools, and you'll learn as I go through my presentation, don't give us the full visibility and picture of what's happening. And this technology, NDR, is a key component to give you the surveillance that you need to properly manage the security profile on your network. To give you an example, most of y'all should know who Gartner is. Gartner, the analyst firm, IT analyst firm, and they say a lot of great things. And Neil McDonald, one of the key people, analysts, excuse me, at Gartner, said detection and response are more important than blocking and prevention. That's a powerful statement. What are we trying to say here? We're trying to say that your firewalls, your security devices, your IPS, your malware protection on your endpoints and things like that are useful, but it's more important for you to actually see that something is happening in transit before, again, it gets out of hand. You need to be able to get the visibility. And how do you get that visibility? You need to collect data. You need to interpret that data. And that's the problem with the human element, is there's a lot of data. A lot of our networks are really big, and even small networks have a lot of traffic going on. There's dozens of applications, possibly hundreds of applications in your network. How do you make heads or tails of what is happening and who should be doing what on these things? So Gartner also came up with this concept of the security visibility triad, and this is kind of the cornerstone of what you should be thinking of in terms of how you manage your security profile and monitor security events on your network. And when we look at this, the first piece is the SIEM/UEBA. And SIEM/UEBA, to give you a little clarity, SIEM is the Security Information Event Management Systems. They do log collection, forensics, and event correlation. They give you the stats that you say that somebody's coming in, and we're correlating events from the firewall logs, from the IPS logs, from these endpoint security logs, or other components, and telling you we have this one event and you need to be worried about it. And UEBA, that's user and entity behavior and analytics. In other words, get information about the user behavior to understand what's normal, what's not normal from an endpoint, from an application perspective, from a border control perspective. This is really giving us the information about the firewalls and perimeter defense within our network infrastructures. The next piece that we want to talk about is this EDR, endpoint detection and response. This is your malware protection, your antivirus, these applications and things that you put on your laptops, your desktops, on your application servers to detect people trying to hack or compromise or get into these individual devices. And that's obviously very important. For my home systems, I have security protections on them for my personal use. For corporate systems, we have it on them as well. And you want to be able to detect that. That's important for you to say, yes, this machine is being attacked. They're trying to do this. They are trying to encrypt my hard drive. They are trying to take advantage of an exploit, a vulnerability, to be able to get to that point. And then this third piece, network detection and response. This is one of the three pieces of this security visibility triad. And what we want to do with NDR is get the understanding of not what's happening on the perimeter, not what's happening on the endpoints, but everything in between. So your network infrastructure, your switching, routing infrastructure between the firewalls, between the applications, between the endpoints, what's happening? Who is going where? What kind of traffic do you see on the highways? Who's going to these systems and why are they doing it? And for us to really understand the security technology and put it all together, we need the security visibility triad. We need all these components working together to make it happen properly. So when we talk about network security, we have multiple components that we want to look at. The first is we want to look at this perimeter security. And this perimeter security, again, is that edge security. This is the walls around the castle, the moat, the firewalls, the IDS, IPS, universal threat management, web filters, all these components that are protecting these things at the border. The challenge with perimeter security is it only does things at the perimeter. Once you get past that moat, once you breach the wall to your castle, everything is fair game. The other piece is that endpoint security. So now we have the using the castle analogy, we have the individuals in this castle, we have the individual rooms or functions within the castle, and now these are being attacked. How do we manage that? They are attacking my application. They are attacking my CRM or HR application. They are attacking my finance application. They are attacking my individual users' machines and my databases. We need that piece. And again, that middle piece, which is the important piece, is network security. What is happening in between? We want, and we always talk about end-to-end multi-level security. So perimeter security and endpoint security gives us the two ends. What is the end-to-end? And that's where network security comes into play. And we utilize open technologies, primarily flow technologies like NetFlow, SFlow, IPFix. They are open standards, party standards, but they're highly supported, and we can collect lots of great, valuable data. And we'll talk about this in a minute. We're using these flow technologies to help manage our security stance. And the other big piece that I want to talk about is this concept of a MITRE attack framework. MITRE is an NGO, non-government organization that does a lot of great work in terms of network security, IT security, and they developed this attack framework. And you can see here they have it broken into two sections, and they have the pieces going along, as you can see through the arrow, from reconnaissance to weaponizing to creating the actual malware to delivering that malware somehow and you do it through an exploit. They control the systems, they execute it, they then spread out to other devices, etc., and maintain, because they want to keep their hold into that environment once they get access to it. And MITRE defined all these different steps. You can see the pre-attack and attack, and recently MITRE actually then consolidated. All this pre-attack is now just attack, and they've taken it now for attack for enterprise, going from reconnaissance to access, execution, etc. I'm not going to read through all the steps of this in the interest of time, but it's a very valuable understanding and for you to think about the logic of how these hackers are getting into your network and what steps they're doing, because it doesn't happen instantaneously. You don't instantaneously have a hacker come, insert malware, do ransomware, encrypt your hard drives, and send you an email. It takes days, weeks, months for them to get to that point, final finishing point. So what can we do in between? What can we do things before they get to that finishing point where there's this huge impact to be able to detect and stop them? So it's a combination of that endpoint, network, and perimeter security, excuse me, that we want for using that security triad to really get that full security profile picture. And this multi-layered security, this end-to-end security. So when we look at these aspects, the perimeter, endpoint, and network you see on the left, and then I go through the flow in an abbreviated fashion of the different steps of the hacker attack, exploiting privileged access. There's reconnaissance also in there at the very beginning, lateral movement, collection, command and control, exfiltration, which is getting the data and information out of your network to them. So now they're uploading your databases to their systems. And impact, what does it mean to you? How does NDR, network detection and response, impact this? And it's all about going through and getting the detection at the different levels. So you can see where NDR does a lot for contributions, obviously at the network layer, but also at the endpoint and perimeter layer too, especially in the early stages, and it can contribute to other pieces for collecting information. So NDR can be a very useful technology for you to incorporate into your security stance and practices to really get a full picture of what is happening with these hackers and what's happening with these attacks through this MITRE ATT&CK framework. So let's talk a little specifically about NDR technology. So I talked about all this cool stuff and what it's doing. How does it work? NDR basic deployment. I have my network and I put a very simple network on the left-hand side. And you can see that I have my switches and my routers, and they're all sending flow data to this appliance on the right, what I call the flow collector. And most vendor firewalls also support flow data export, like NetFlow and IPFix. So you have this flow appliance in at Kemp, we call ours Flowmon, is the name of our technology. We have this Flowmon appliance that's collecting this flow data, and it's now making heads or tails of what this all means to your network and consolidating and giving you useful information. If you want more detailed information, or you have places in your network where you don't have the ability to send this flow data, you can put flow sensors in the network. So you can position them on mirror or span ports, or just, in line in certain parts of the network, or, passively, so that you can collect even more information. It's very simple and easy to deploy for NDR. You just install the collector, you turn on the flow data sending from all these different devices, you send it to the collector, and you start receiving intelligent information immediately. And the problem, again, excuse me, is this needle in a haystack. We have this problem where there's a lot of network traffic. I don't care if your network is big or small. There's a lot of stuff going on your network. Lots of bits per second, lots of packets, a lot of connections. What I call, from a networking perspective, your 5 tuples, your source, destination, IP, TCP, UDP, IP protocol, that kind of stuff. And it is impossible, again, for that human to manage that and make heads or tails of that in real time on a constant basis. It just is not possible. So you need some way to separate what is good, what is normal traffic that you expect to see in the course of your business day and night and everything else, versus what is bad, what should not be happening on your network. And that's where this NDR technology comes in, because it's collecting the data from all these data points on your network, and it's able to tell you, using what I call heuristics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, behavior learning, whatever you want to call it, is using some sort of intelligence brain power, artificial brain power, to interpret all this data to say, this is good information. You should be going to that system. These people should be going to that system. These two systems should be talking to each other. And then on the other hand, it can say, why is this person accessing the finance server when they normally don't? They never have for 6 months, and all of a sudden we have a connection to the finance server. Why is that happening? Or why is this connection coming in from the internet to the system or trying to get to the system? And what type of things are we seeing? Are we seeing things like port scans or brute force password attacks or some other vulnerability that they're trying to exploit? NDR can detect that and flag it to give you specific actionable information. So talking about this NDR detection capabilities, we want to leverage this MITRE ATT&CK framework because it's a great framework to understand the flow and process of these hackers and their mindset. And we want to go through and identify these threats and then apply them to specific categories like discovery or exploitation or exfiltration. And we can use examples. For example, there might be a brute force attack. Somebody's trying to send 5,000 username passwords per second trying to log onto the system. That's not normal. There's definitely a brute force attack going on. Who is doing it? Who's the source? Start doing some sort of action against it. In this case that I have in the screenshot is an exfiltration. We have data being sent from one of the systems or databases in your network to some external source, destination, that's unexpected, that's inappropriate. And now you can say, number one, shut that down, and two, who is that we are sending that data to? You get the details quickly and easily through these NDR technologies because they give you the full packet flow information about these attacks. And when we talk about these tools, again, the security triad, we want things to integrate. We want things to work together. So the SIEM and security analytics integration is critical. We want, for example, to take this NDR technology and get the alerts that it's sending and send this information in terms of events and things happening to the element management system or to SOAR. SOAR stands for Security Orchestration Automation Response. And that's kind of a new technology or category that we're building in the security world. We want these things to work together. All these security elements that you put together should not be an island in and of themselves. They should work together and share information so that you can get the bigger, cleaner picture of what is going on. And therefore, you can get cleaner or more accurate responses in terms of what is happening on your network and take more actionable tasks to be able to respond and to mitigate. The last thing you want your tools to do is, number one, you don't want too many false negatives because that just means that you're being inundated with events and alerts. And I'm sure a lot of you all have been dealing with this because it happens all the time. And these alerts and events are so overwhelming but meaningless that your security tools lose value. And then there's the opposite, false positives. The last thing, and I reverse that, false negatives, false positives. The false positives are the ones where you get overwhelmed with these items, and then the false negatives are the ones where the attack went through, but you never detected it. You don't want that either. You want to be as accurate and precise as possible with your security tools, and this is critical for you. So as we continue talking about this, ultimately, you cannot manage and protect what you can't see. When we look at intelligence agencies and surveillance from the governments and from the police states and the military, the number one thing they care about is not going out and shutting things down, but getting visibility, getting the surveillance systems, getting the intelligence programs, getting the information so that they can then decide what they want to do with the potential threats that they see. So NDR is designed to detect the threats immediately without putting a burden of interpretation, because again, the secret sauce, the intelligence, the brain power is built into this NDR collector. And it will weed out and tell you, this is what's important, this is what you need to deal with, don't worry about the rest, I got it, I know what is happening. It's going to give you insight using these sophisticated algorithms, machine learning, heuristics, artificial intelligence. Use your marketing term of the day, but it has some intelligence built into it because we program and configure these systems based on what we know in terms of behaviors, what we know in terms of what the specific threats are, so we can do some pattern matching, things like that, and tell you this is what is important, so that we take that first triage or second level of triage away from the human and put it into the engine. Behavior pattern recognition, detecting anomalies. So again, you might have a finance system and all your payroll and everything is going through it, and there's a specific group of people that should have access to it. And there's a much larger group of people, even internal employees, that should not have access to it. If that one person is now accessing it on a regular basis and downloading data and they never have in the past 6 months, that's a concern. But a lot of security tools may not see that from the network or firewall perspective because they're just saying, oh, it's internal communication, that's fine. Or it might be application server because the hacker has compromised one of the servers. So it's not even a user, but one of the servers attacking the other server. How do you detect that? Because they're both internal. Detecting these behavior patterns and creating these baselines and understanding what the anomalies are based on these behaviors becomes very important. And real-time detection. Because you're collecting this data real time, and there's almost real time, not quite real time because it takes some time to collect the data, a couple minutes, and then time for it to do the analysis to give you this information. So you get things almost immediately in terms of what you need to do. And I need to type here real quick. So real quick customer story. Here's a situation where there's advanced malware and they're basically hijacking DNS, putting an unexpected DNS server or putting a fake DNS server on the network so that when users connected to the DNS server, they were going to bad sites. And now these hackers are getting access to usernames, passwords, and all sorts of valuable information. And this is something that normally would not be detected for a lot of systems because DNS is fairly open and we want it to be fairly open. But now, because we are using this type of technology, NDR, we can identify that these are bad things. And lastly, if there's one thing I want you to take away from what I told you today, test drive. I would love it if you test drive with Kemp, but test drive with anybody. Understand this technology, do a network assessment, bring the technology, NDR technology into the network and see what is happening, because I can tell you your eyes are going to blow open. It's like when I was a kid and the first time I looked through a microscope and looked at a drop of water from the ocean. And you think it's a drop of water, but then you look in the microscope and there's all these things in there that you had no idea existed. I can almost guarantee that's what's going to happen with your network. You're like, wow, I had no idea this is what's happening on my network. Now, what can I do to understand and address this? So do some sort of evaluation. Certainly go to our website, check it out, see what we can do. Is again, easy to deploy and test NDR technology based on what it is. You have a lot of the pieces in place already with the flow technologies. Do what you can to make it happen. So again, thank you for doing that, listening to this, and hopefully this was valuable and you'll be take some things away.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation, Frank. Really appreciate that. Cool stuff. We do have some questions for you. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up a poll question for everyone out there that simply says, what additional information would you like about Kemp? So we'll leave this up while we take your questions. And I do want to point out to everyone that the Q&A widget is now working, and we look forward to your questions. Don't forget about the best question prize as well. If you have any trouble with the Q&A widget, just push refresh on your web browser. So let's see, first question I wanted to ask you, Frank, is they want to know, how does NDR complement or differ from what we have in our existing security and network management tools?
So that's a great question. And similar to what I talked about in the presentation, we have these other tools like the SIEMs and like the IPS and the firewalls. But really and truly, it's designed to be complementary because it's addressing a portion of your network architecture that a lot of these other tools and technologies don't address. Again, you have perimeter solutions, you have endpoint solutions, but what are you doing for the middle? What are you doing for your network infrastructure? What are you doing about the east-west communications as well as the north-south? So it's designed to complement those technologies and really, again, provide you that end-to-end multi-layer security strategy that everybody should be implementing. So don't think of it as a replacement for any technology that you have, but more as a complementary that gives you more insight and more value to what you have today.
Got it. Okay. And then another question here, they want to know, can I integrate the MITRE framework into my overall security model?
Absolutely. So the MITRE framework is not something that is Kemp specific. Like I mentioned, it's created by an independent third-party organization, and Kemp is not the only vendor that supports and works with the MITRE framework. Most of the firewall vendors support the MITRE framework. A lot of the other security vendors support the MITRE framework. So if you want to take advantage of the MITRE framework, you have these other tools, technologies in place, you can tie it all together already today, because we are categorizing based on this framework. The other vendors hopefully probably are categorizing by this framework. So now you can use this framework as your top level picture of where the security threats apply.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then next question, can NDR help against attacks like ransomware?
Oh, that's a great question. The short answer is yes. The long answer is, and it won't be too long, the long answer is if your hard drives and data has already been stolen and encrypted, that's not where NDR plays. It's not designed to unencrypt your hard drives or to get your data back or anything like that. What it's designed to do is detect the ransomware attack before that event happens. Like I mentioned, these hackers take time, and again, they take days, weeks, because it takes time to do the reconnaissance, to probe your network, to find out the vulnerabilities, to get access to one system that was vulnerable, and then they had to strip through and get access to other systems using other vulnerabilities, using the east-west communications. So there's a lot of things that happen, and it can take literally weeks, days, and even months for these attacks to happen. On average, it takes over 200 days for a company to determine that they've been attacked. So during this time, NDR can detect all these events leading to that impactful event of your hard drive being encrypted and you getting an email saying send Bitcoin to so-and-so location. And now you can stop the attacker before they get to the point where they can take control of what they really want.
Yeah, that's an amazing stat, 200 days that an attacker is in the network. So definitely a big need out there for NDR. I'm afraid that's all the time we have in the live Q&A here, Frank, but really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for listening.
And thank you to Kemp, of course, for presenting on the event. Check out the handouts tab, and it's there that you'll find a case study on how video game company Sega, I don't know if any of you remember Sega, I know I do, on how Sega used Kemp to better protect their network and their data. So make sure that you check that out, a cool case study from Kemp there in the handouts tab. All right, and with that, it's now time for our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce you to Mr. Eric Crone, Security Awareness Advocate at KnowBe4. Hey, Eric, it's great to have you back on.
Yeah, it's been too long. Always a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Take it away.
All right, awesome. So we're going to have a little, fun, I suppose, today. The idea today is, now this is going to be very, very fast and fairly high level because we only have a half hour, but if you have any questions, please reach out to me and get those questions in the Q&A because this is always an interesting topic, ransomware, and the way that it is today. But I'm going to talk about the Ransomware Hostage Rescue Guide. It's a free thing that we put out here at KnowBe4. It's a great reference for preparing for a ransomware attack. It's for before, during, and after an attack. And so we got some great check boxes and things like that in there. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a few minutes to do kind of an overview of what this is about and just give you some info so that if you want to, you can dig into it and check it out even more. Now I'm with KnowBe4 Security Awareness Training, Simulated Phishing company. We focus on the human element, which unfortunately is the thing that seems to be going wrong over and over again, whether it's a phishing email getting people in or people misusing passwords and doing password reuse, getting attackers in through RDP or other remote access portals. That's just so much of the problem that's out there. And while they get in and they take advantage of unpatched software and things like that to pivot around and all of that, the initial attack vector just seems like it's almost always some sort of a human action. So that's what we focus on. That's our whole goal, is to try to get ahead of this. Now, my background, I've been in IT and security since back in the 90s. I've seen a lot of things throughout my time. I've worked in healthcare, I've worked in manufacturing, I was a technical services manager at an MSP. Then I spent about 10 years with the Department of Defense as a contractor with the US Army at what is now the 2nd Regional Cyber Center, Western Hemisphere. So I became the security manager there, but I got to go through a lot of different areas there as I became the security manager. And again, for me, I'm a very technical person. Like, I'm a total geek. I have rack servers running in the garage. I got Raspberry Pis on my desk. I'm a geek. I love technology, but I had to finally come to the realization in my career that technology isn't the end-all be-all here. It is incredibly helpful, and it does help a tremendous amount, but it's not the end-all be-all. We have to look at the human factor, and I'm not blaming people when I say that people end up getting hit all the time. It's not really their fault, especially if we don't prepare them for it, but they're being targeted all the time. And I want us to think about that. We hire accountants to do accounting. We hire other people to do, our marketing and such, not to all be security experts. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a baseline ability to defend themselves. And that's kind of what we're all about, is let's get them to the point that they can defend themselves. We're not trying to make them security pros. So here's the document I'm going to be going through here real quick. Again, this is a very, very high level kind of cruise through this document. I think you would find that there's a lot of great information in this, and I'm not saying that just because I helped edit it the last couple of times, but there really is a lot of good information on this. I highly recommend you print it out like you do your incident response plan, right? We all have our incident response plan printed because if something goes wrong, obviously getting to electronic stuff can be a challenge. So let's get going on this here real quick. First of all, one of the things we have to realize with respect to ransomware is it's no longer, I like to say the kid in the basement drinking Mountain Dew, eating pizza. These are really, really highly evolved groups and gangs. The attacks that they pull off are amazing, quite honestly, and they have a lot of really, really good talent behind them. So what's happened is, though, this has gone pro. This has really jumped significantly. The cost of ransomware, right? Do we remember back when it was $400 or $500 a machine? I believe back in 2018, the average ransom was somewhere around $6,000. By 2019, it was up to $84,000, I think. I mean, just a huge jump. So it's really, really made a difference. The other thing that's happened with ransomware that's made a huge difference in the whole thing is they started exfiltrating data. So what they do is they exfiltrate the data, and then they threaten you that they're going to dump it publicly. Well, unfortunately, you already have a security breach on your hands once the data is gone, but now you have that extra bit of leverage that they put at you there. It's unfortunate. We saw this with the Maze ransomware variant starting back in late 2019, and it has just accelerated, and now that's what's driving so much of these incredibly high ransoms that we have these days. So Group IB, yeah, here we go, 6,000 to 84,000. Attacks rose by 40%. And then Coveware said first quarter of 2020, it was 111,605. Sophos said total cost more than doubles if you decide to pay the ransom, because you still have to do your digital forensics. You still have to figure out how they got in, where they got in, how that's going on, We just heard they spend upwards of 200 days in systems. Now, they don't typically do that in ransomware, but it's no longer the kind of stuff where they just somebody clicks on something and it just fires off this automated piece of software. These are actually humans and people that are in there. They get a foothold through a reverse access Trojan or something like that, and then they cruise around. They look for the things that are worth so much to you, and then they fire this off. And we've seen it a couple times where organizations did not find out how the attackers got in, and it turned bad on them. One of them was in the UK. I think they paid £2.4 million for their ransom. They restored everything, and within, it was a month or so, they got hit again, same group, another £2.4 million because they didn't figure out how they got in. So you're going to pay for that. It's going to cost you. That's why the cost goes so high. Even if you pay the ransom, the deal's not over with. So the anatomy of a phishing ransomware attack, sort of, and I'm doing this very, very high level. I know they're not all like this, but this is the majority. This is how most of them work. And there's a point to this. First of all, users tricked into opening a link or an infected document. This is how it happens in phishing. The link or infected document contains a dropper, then downloads the actual malware. So it's not actually the ransomware that's attached to the document or that they download with the link or that they open in some other way. It actually gets a dropper. Now the dropper turns around and it actually hits the command and control channel generally and figures out what it's supposed to do at this point. And it goes out and grabs the actual malware, or it grabs the remote access Trojan, lots of other stuff, the tools that these folks need, and it's going to sit there for whatever. Now, after they've figured out what they're doing, step 3, data is exfiltrated. They move the data out of your system. Again, they're going for the good stuff. Now, I've seen tons of data being moved out. Drives me crazy when I see 450 gigs or 750 gigs or a terabyte of data moved out of a network and nobody noticed it. But this is what's happening. So then the last thing they do is the noisy portion, and that is they encrypt the data. So they fire off the encryption piece. Again, a lot of their leverage these days is actually from the exfiltrated data, but they hit that encryption piece and they try to do as much damage as they can. When that's all over with, when the world is in a bad place, that's when the screen shows up. By then, honestly, it's too late. And frankly, even if you stop the encryption while that's happening, they've already got the data at this point. So it's something that we want to think about and be aware of. It gets pretty ugly pretty fast with that. Now, what's important about this is there's a lot of traffic going to and from your networks. So keep that in mind. You're looking for traffic leaving your network too. If you don't have your firewall set up to block outbound traffic, this may be a good time to look at why you're allowing FTP out of your network. Why are you allowing SSH connections out to the internet? These are all things that are used by the attackers for command and control channels, things like that. Even DNS, not going to your own DNS server is a risk because we see command and control traffic over 53. So when this happens, this thing's going to pop up. Now, the thing is, these are always in your face. It's kind of a big deal. They want to get paid. That's the big deal. So really noisy, really in your face. If it's not right there in front of you, there's probably going to be something in a folder like a text file or an HTML file that's going to tell you how to get paid. This way, let's say they attack from some headless machine and the ransom spread, they still have a way to get it to you. I mean, the reason behind ransomware is money. It's all money. It's pure cash. So the next thing is, speaking of money, they're going to want some sort of payment. Well, easiest way to do that right now is cryptocurrency. It's not, in the beginning, people thought that cryptocurrency was untraceable. That's not true. However, these days, there's things like Bitcoin mixers where you can take your ill-gotten gains and put them through this mixer that basically launders it. So you put in, say, 2 Bitcoin, and it's going to spit out pieces of it over time, not all at the same moment generally, but over time, it's going to spit out pieces of that minus their handling fee. So it basically mixes it with another bunch of them and then splits them up to other places. It makes it very, very hard to track. It's also one of these things that, generally speaking, in a ransom situation, where the attackers get hit, where the bad actors get hit, is on the transfer of money. So if it's picking up the bag of cash like you see in those spy movies, or they're giving back whatever it is they've stolen, that's kind of one of those places where they know where they're going to be and when, where this kind of cryptocurrency has changed it. Now, it's not always Bitcoin. It can be Monero. It can be Ethereum. It can be lots of different things depending on what the attackers want to play. In the beginning, it was very simple. It was gift cards. But now we're talking about a lot more money than that. Can you imagine going down to your local CVS and asking for $2.1 million in Apple's iTunes gift cards? They're probably going to look at you a little funny, right? So this is why this works so well. Next thing they're going to do to try to stay anonymous is, generally speaking, the other side is going to be on the Tor network. And this is the Onion router network. It's designed to work to be more anonymous. Is it 100% anonymous? No. If you control it, some of the nodes in there, you can definitely find out what's going on. However, this is where you're going to have to go, generally speaking, to find out information about you. They're going to post proof of life. In other words, here's proof of data that we stole from you, and it's generally going to be on the dark web. You're going to get there through the Tor browser. So be familiar with Tor, know how to use a Tor browser, make sure you only download a Tor browser from an actual Tor site. There's been changes made in the Tor browser at times where they'll mess around and basically proxy things and replace Bitcoin wallet addresses with their own. There's no honor among thieves. So then you pay your ransom, but it actually went to someone else because you're not using an actual Tor browser. It's pretty crazy. It just blows my mind what these folks are up to. It's a shame they don't use this for good instead of evil, right? So have I been infected? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You can't open them. The extensions are all changing. You got that big message. You got those folders or files in each of the encrypted folders. This is all the stuff. It's going to tell you pretty quickly. Not usually a big deal to figure out, gee, I've been infected by this thing. So what do? Well, disconnect. When I say disconnect, I mean unplug it from the network, all right? Generally speaking, you want to leave the machine on, but disconnect it from the network. Disconnect any external hard drives from it. Make sure the Bluetooth is off. Make sure that it's not doing Wi-Fi. And make a record of, keep an eye on what was plugged in or mapped to what drive letter. Because later on, we'll talk about if you pay the ransom, you need to reconnect those in order for it to be decrypted by the ransomware. So you want to disconnect everything to keep it running. Determine the scope. Figure out how far it went. Did it hit your database servers? Did it just go for shares? How far did it get before it stopped or was stopped? Then you want to determine the strain. The strain will tell you its capabilities. It'll tell you what the ransomware actors are like. In other words, will they negotiate time? Will they negotiate money? There's lots of information you can find out once you know the strain of ransomware you've been attacked with. So those are kind of the key things right there if it happens. Now, you have a couple of responses, not great ones, generally speaking, but there's basically 4 options. And this is best to worst. Restore from a recent backup. That's your best bet if you can, but you want to be careful with this. I always say, restore the data, not the machines. Don't go bare metal restores because remember, these folks are in those systems for a while. They're going to create persistence for themselves. If you turn around and just restore a bunch of stuff from your backups as a bare metal, you might be restoring those backdoors they used to get in. Rebuild the machine, then restore just the data piece if you need it, okay? Decrypt them using a third-party decryptor. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Very slim chance on that, but who knows? You can do nothing. You can just suck it up and say, all right, I've lost the data, we're moving on. Depending on how significant it is or how big the attack went or what data it got, this may be an option for you. And then last but not least is negotiate or pay the ransom. Now, it is really important to understand right now that none of these things right here impact the fact that data is gone. You still have a data breach. There's just no way around that. And it's unfortunate, but it is what's happened at this point. Now, if you're in a regulatory sort of situation, like under HIPAA or something like that, if your data was encrypted at rest, you may not have a big deal. And then the attackers don't necessarily have anything to leverage you against. If all they have is encrypted data, that's not a lever for them. Now, odds are they're going to try to find the unencrypted data or have a way to decrypt it. Again, they will generally show you what they've taken out on a Tor website that essentially says, this is the data we got, or here's an example of the data we got, numbers of folders, stuff like that, to prove that they were in there and get that. Now, it's one of these things where these sites are kind of hard to get to sometimes. Like most of these, or a lot of these ransomware actors actually have their own sites up on the dark web. If you know where to go, you can check them out and see, like, what are they publishing today? How many organizations did they hit today? And a lot of times they're going to send you to that. Sometimes they'll have their own page for the individuals, but a lot of times you'll see them in groups like that. You can kind of keep an idea of what's going on out there. Next thing though, is you want to rid it of all the ransomware, right? And this is what I'm saying. Just wipe the machine unless there's a really good reason not to. And I love this. Yay, aliens. Nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. You just don't know what's on that machine or how long it's been there if you restore from a bare metal. Again, this can be a big problem. And we've seen this be a big problem time and time again. So highly recommend that you nuke it from orbit and restore just the data. Now understand that paying the ransom doesn't end the ordeal. And we've kind of talked about that a little bit. Even if you pay it and they say, oh, well, we're going to delete it, and they pinky swear that they delete it, let's remember here that these are the folks that stole your data and are basically holding you hostage or extorting you for money in the first place. That means they're not really great people, and we probably shouldn't trust them. Now, even if they don't dump it on the open internet, you better believe they're going to turn around and sell some of this stuff on the dark web. It's just the way of the world. Again, these folks are generally in this for money. Very few examples. There's been, what was it, NotPetya, I think. That was, it was basically data destruction malware that was trying to pretend to be ransomware. There was no way to decrypt the data, although people would pay the ransom on occasion. But all it did is go through and wipe. But for the most part, this is what they're after. They're after the money. So they're going to get it every way that they can and every means that they can. We've even seen something pretty bad, and this is we call it the double extortion deal. And one example of it happened here in Florida. A plastic surgery clinic got breached. Their data got pulled. It looked like they weren't going to pay. The attackers turned around, went after the customers of the plastic surgery center and said, if we don't get our money, your information, all of your before and after plastic surgery pictures and all this stuff is going to be dumped on the internet. And you better believe that put a lot of pressure on that surgery clinic, right? So they've been known to go that way, or just go to the individuals and say, we're going to dump this because they haven't paid. Now, if you pay us 10 grand, your stuff won't be part of that dump. Either way, as an organization, can you imagine how happy those people would be with you if you put them in that situation? The answer is probably not very. So remember, it doesn't end the ordeal. Just paying the ransom doesn't mean you can walk away. Now, if you pay the ransom, will you get your files back? The answer is yes, maybe. And I say maybe because in most of the cases that I've heard, it's not 100% of the data that ends up getting restored. Sometimes files will be damaged in the encryption process. They won't decrypt properly. Maybe the tools, garbage. Something happens and the files just aren't good. This happens, on a pretty regular basis, that some percentage of it doesn't come back perfectly. The other thing that happens here is sometimes, like in the case of DarkSide, sometimes the infrastructure is taken down by law enforcement or an ISP, and all of a sudden, it doesn't matter, your key, you can't get a key, or it doesn't work with the command and control stuff, and there's no way to actually get your data back. This has happened more often than I care to think about, and it's unfortunate. But there's been a number of cases like this where this has happened. The other things that I've seen done here is, like I said, the Tor browser, where they've messed around with that. I've also seen them do things like They say, well, okay, here's your data back. And by the way, we have this other subset of data too. You're going to pay us for that as well. We've seen, back with the MongoDB things, there was groups that were encrypting already encrypted MongoDB databases. So you would pay for your decryption, you would get that back, and you would end up with another encryption by a different ransomware group that you would have to pay. I mean, it was like layers. It's not pretty, folks. So we want to be careful with that. Don't rely on the fact that you're just going to get your files back if you pay. Yeah, you'll generally get most of them back, but understand that you never know. The other thing about it is, do you trust those files? And I'll throw on, a gray hat here and say, if I'm an attacker and I have access to your data, and I'm cruising around at the point that I can exfiltrate stuff and I can play all those games I want to do, what's to keep me from getting into, say, some databases and change bank accounts where payments for invoices go and play games like that? Like, do you really trust that data once someone else has had access to it like that? I mean, that would be the way that I would do things, frankly, is I would also plug in a bunch of stuff like that to get payments over to somewhere else. This would be the gift that keeps on giving. So don't be surprised if you see stuff like that happen as well. Now, once you've paid it to decrypt it, you may have to wait a little bit to get the keys, okay? Again, just because they're decrypted doesn't mean they're undamaged. You may see a recurring theme here with me. Don't trust anything. But generally speaking, you'll end up getting the executable and it will start decrypting your files. Now, one of the things you have to remember is that you need to reconnect all of those external drives. Remember I said you want to be sure that you know what drives are mapped and all that kind of good stuff when you disconnect the patient zero, if you will, that started all this. Because if the decryptor can't reach or can't touch the files that it's set to decrypt, then you still have encrypted files. So if you don't remap it to a drive and you run the decryptor, there's no way it can decrypt those files. Same with external drives, any map drives, thumb drives, any of that kind of stuff. You have to have that in there, and generally speaking, you want it in the same path that it was at the time of encryption. So avoiding infection. Now this is the trick right here. Obviously, frankly, folks, we're not doing a great job if you look at the news at how often this is happening. It's not easy, though, and I'm not beating anyone up for it. It's just not easy. Again, these are good attackers. So these are the things that I recommend, that we recommend, and we break it down in the document a bit. But good endpoint protection and antivirus. It's the Hail Mary, it's the, geez, I hope this really works sort of thing. But it's not the one thing that you want to rely on to save your bacon against that. Network segmentation helps a lot in keeping the ransomware from spreading to other places. It can also keep the attackers in one subnet or one group of machines if you have it subnetted well. And then maybe they only get workstations, but they don't actually take out your servers, etc. I mean, this is what segmenting is really good for. DLP is a requirement these days because, again, they're taking data out of here by the droves. It's incredible how much data. So you got to be looking at different controls around data loss prevention. Good spam filters is another one. We want to keep this stuff, I say spam, but it's also phishing emails, right? Same sort of thing. They hit these things. But you want to keep that out of the user's inboxes as much as possible. It's better. These things aren't perfect, right? So they'll still pass 9 or 10%, sometimes a little bit less, but not much. But it's way better to have one phishing email hit their inbox than 10 a day, right? So makes a big difference on that. Weapons grade backups, that means test them, follow the 3-2-1 rules, if you've heard of that, and do some security awareness training, the new school security awareness training. Now, I find that people do this last part very wrong, and I do want to talk about that because this is what we do, and we're pretty experts at this. We've seen a lot of things that work and don't work. So let me give you some tips on how to do that, because frankly, that's the forward ending. That's the thing that you can do that stops the user from starting this chain reaction which you're then on the wrong side of trying to stop. So problems I see, most security awareness programs are superficial, done for compliance. Pop people in a room once a year, feed them donuts and coffee, and yay, you're secure. It doesn't work that way. It has to be repetition. It has to be good quality stuff that gets them engaged. And I recommend you do, instead of one big one per year, you break it up into quarters, or maybe 15 minutes per quarter about things that are happening around that time frame. Things like, we're coming into the holiday season. First quarter is going to be tax scams. Tell them stuff like that matters. So you train them, and then you do simulated phishing. So again, you're looking for things that are going to tell you where their weaknesses are. And that's a very important thing. It's kind of like doing the lab after you've learned in an instructor-led training. People learn a lot from that. So when you put them together, they can be a lot more effective. This is like the 4 steps we use. A lot of people I see use the middle 2 steps on their own. And, I don't care whether you do this with us, on your own, or with somebody. These are the 4 steps we find that work. But again, I see people train users and phish users, but they don't figure out a baseline, see where they're coming from. They don't watch the results, and the results can be very telling. If you're just doing your training because you think this is what's going on, you may not realize that your users aren't clicking on links, but they're very prone to opening documents and enabling active content. So maybe you focus your training on links, which they're not falling for. This is great information for you to help understand a little bit more what your battle is, and that'll help you kind of spearhead things and do a lot better with it. So see the results, get a baseline, know where you are, know if you're improving or not. Train them. And this is more than just phishing. We're talking about password hygiene here. We're talking about teaching people the right way to do things, and then through repetition, building a stronger security culture eventually. Do that phishing piece and see the results. Keep an eye on that. Lather, rinse, repeat. The first 3 things, or the second 3 things, actually. The baseline you only do once. So does it work? Yes. 6.6 million users. We checked this year. Initial click rate, 31%. 3 months later, 90 days, down to 16%. 12 months later, a little bit under 5%. It's a huge improvement. Now, if you think that you'll be at 0%, or you think, oh, it's not worth doing if it's not 0%, how many of your security controls are 100%? The answer is none of them, okay? There's always going to be stuff. This is why we have layered defenses. But again, you're much better having a 5% click rate than a 31% click rate. I can tell you from personal experience the difference that's made in the fires I've had to put out as a team lead or a security guy. The fires that I had to put out when people were clicking on everything rather than cutting it way back like that. So that being said, I have absolutely flown through these. These are all of these slides that I have. This is my contact information. If you got questions, you want to chat more about this, feel free to reach out to me. I always love to talk about this stuff because it's so dynamic and it's happening so fast out there. We can all learn from each other, and we can all learn better ways to defend each other. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter there at Eric Krohn, or my email address, or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat.
As always, excellent presentation, Eric. Really appreciate that. I learned a lot. I mean, these are scary times, and KnowBe4 has an awesome solution. We use it here at Actual Tech Media as well, so I've got some personal experience. I do want to bring up this poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the KnowBe4 solution? And we'll leave that up while we take your questions. So we encourage some questions if you have something on your mind. First question, Eric, I wanted to ask you, they want to know, when it comes to sending out these phishing campaigns, what's the right amount and frequency, to be phishing?
Yeah, okay, I'm going to give you the contractor answer here and say it depends. But it really does. It depends on your organizational culture. I say as often as you can do it, the better, right? But you want to make sure it's not something that frustrates them. What I find is in organizations that gamify it, that basically give people a chance for a positive outcome when they send these because they caught it, they reported it, now they're a step ahead in whatever their gamification program is. You can do it every couple weeks and people are perfectly happy with that. if people view it as being something that's a negative, like, oh, they're getting me, they're trying to trick me, they're trying to do that, and that's not the idea behind these. It's really about practicing. But if you still have that mentality or that culture, you're going to want to do it far less often. Now, what we found is, statistically speaking, if you do it less than once a month, the effectiveness really falls off. So you want to do it at least once a month, but try making it a good experience, not one that that people don't like, you know, not a negative thing. We're big on the carrot versus the stick.
Yeah, very smart. I like that. Another question, what about, different types of phishing content for different types of employees, like IT pros, devs versus cashiers versus the executives?
Yeah, you're probably going to want to have different stuff there. And this is where your knowledge of the organization comes into play. Now, we got a couple thousand different training modules. And I mean, it's crazy. It really is. It can be overwhelming a little bit if you just try to browse everything. But what you got to realize is you're going to train, let's say, a law office differently than you are a startup in Silicon Valley, right? It's a different culture. It's a different group. They're going to see things differently. Even with executives, you're going to want to train them a little bit differently than you may all of the workers, because they're going to be dealing with a different type of threat. They're dealing a lot with whaling, very sophisticated phishing stuff, as opposed to the typical worker, which may have something a little bit focused, but not nearly like the whaling. So you want to look at those, and you want to tailor those either by department or by tier, but especially by your organization's culture and how you're going to do this.
Well said, Eric. Sorry, I was on mute.
The old mute button, yeah.
That's right. So, Eric, this is something we could chat about all day, I know, but we're running out of time here in our live Q&A session. There are some more electronic questions there for you from the audience in the queue, and I know you posted your contact information as well. That was very generous. Eric, it's been great to having you on. I always learn so much when you're here. Thank you.
Awesome. Always happy to be here. And look forward to any questions anyone may have.
Awesome. For more information on KnowBe4, check out the handouts tab right there, and you will find a link to the KnowBe4 ransomware hostage rescue guide that Eric talked about in his presentation, and also the free KnowBe4 Ransim or ransomware simulator. Make sure that you check out those resources for additional information. All right. Thank you to everyone who responded to the poll question. It's now time to move on to our next presenter on today's EcoCast. I'm excited now to bring in Mr. Mike Wilkes, Chief Information Security Officer at Security Scorecard. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Welcome, everyone, to the next session. Is this the last session of the day?
It is, yeah, Mike. You're here to bring it on home. So thanks for being on.
All right, well, thanks. So as was mentioned, my name is Mike Wilkes. I'm the CISO at Security Scorecard. And I just wanted to mention briefly that KnowBe4 is a great platform. I've used it previously at other organizations as well, and used it to train and harden our users against phishing attacks. It is all about practice. So some of the things I'd like to discuss with you today. For building a robust security awareness program. So I wanted to just dive right in and describe the agenda of what I had in mind to share with you all. So first, I'd like to, before actually getting to the heart of what Security Scorecard contributes to a robust security awareness program, hint, automation and scale, I'd like to set the stage for thinking about security awareness by reviewing the mission of InfoSec and some changes in the default security model. So first, I'll talk about data classification, a little bit about email and phishing, then third-party risk management, which is our sweet spot, and then event-based assessments, which is a powerful combination of security scorecard ratings, scanning the internet every day, and being able to trigger an assessment based on a score drop or an event like a breach event or just particular findings showing up on a scorecard. So first off, the mission. This is a word cloud, and let me jump the slide forward. There we go. This is a word cloud that was created from the About page on securityscorecard.com, security is not the domain of one team, as you've, I'm sure, heard today from several practitioners, but it's everyone's responsibility. It just makes practical sense, of course, that some people spend a larger percentage of their time thinking about and working on security. But a high-performing security organization is more than just titles and tools. The quality of the team is expressed not only in the documentation that it produces, but also in the myriad interactions that occur daily between the team members and the rest of the organization, its partners, vendors, and customers. So let's start with data classification. And data classification is an old model, actually. If you think about the castle and the keep, a perimeter-based security model is now decidedly legacy design. Data-centric security takes as its focus the protection of data where it lives. So there really is no DMZ battle going on anymore. All right? That's been taken to every workstation, every laptop, tablet, and mobile device. And of course, observability is what's happening. You need to know and have observability with what's happening on your cloud footprint. That's essential to robust security awareness. And because Security Scorecard scans the internet every day, all of IPv4, we provide the ability to discover assets that you didn't even know existed. Of course, once you identify, where your footprint is, your digital footprint, you still need to think about the data, right? Because not every IP address has interesting data behind it. So if data is the gold, right, the digital gold of a modern economy, then what are the data assets the organization needs to protect the most? Ransomware, of course, is one of the biggest threats to a company right now. Where is your data? Do you have backups for disaster recovery? Do you have archives for compliance purposes? Think about the work that you do each week. What would you need to recover your applications and systems, their configurations and the data? Has it been tested or restored lately to confirm recoverability? And of course, the triad of people, process, and tools, a familiar Venn diagram with data right at the center. I believe tools are, of course, a necessary ingredient to an effective security program, but they are not sufficient. I often talk about pre-breach and post-breach CISOs. Pre-breach CISOs tend to focus more on tools, but post-breach CISOs, folks that have been through an incident, they realize that people and process are actually far more important. All hands on deck is more of a liability during an incident if you don't have a solid process in place. And diving into one of the main topics, just because I like to talk about monkeys, and I like to think of us all affectionately as monkeys, so hopefully you're not offended by this. But I was once asked a question at an InfoSec meetup a few years ago. Not these exact words, but you get the idea. If you had to choose, why would you choose and what, or which one? So my answer is that I would choose smart monkeys and dumb tools. Why? Because people are your last line of defense. And after all the tools have had their chance to block, quarantine, or otherwise delay an email from reaching a user inbox, you know that a couple of them will get there, and dangerous links or attachments and all. So flex the skeptical muscle and test and train and test. It will be the thing that can save you from a malware outbreak, a data breach, or worse. So invest time and money and attention in your InfoSec program to security training and awareness. It's money well spent. So phishing plays upon 4 different aspects: fatigue, curiosity, vanity, and greed. So how do we get lured by a phishing email? Well, these factor traits, they play a big role in the relative success of a phishing campaign or a phishing test. And knowing when to send a message, of course, is a key element to phishing with regard to fatigue. So start of day and end of day are two present windows. 2 windows that are present for a lot of hapless clicks that happen. And of course, curiosity is one of the most powerful motivations for any call to action in an email with a promising or an inviting link or attachment. And of course, vanity is a tried and true approach as well, of course. You won't get a terribly wide catch in my experience using vanity as your testing of susceptibility to phishing, but you always do get a few big-headed personality types. If the social media research is well done and tailored to the moment and to the individual. And lastly, let's not forget that there's always ways and always financial incentives that can be relied upon to catch a few clicks every scenario that you run with a monetary angle to the motivation to click or download something. It does not, of course, mind you, have to be a big amount. Indeed, a $25 Amazon gift card is much more plausible and inviting than a $500 gift card for most people. Let's talk a little bit real quick about each of these 4. So fatigue, deteriorating quality of decision-making by an individual. In decision-making and psychology, decision fatigue refers to the deteriorating quality of decisions made by an individual after a long session of decision making. So maybe that's where you are right now, today, after a long day. It's also understood that is one of the causes of irrational trade-offs in decision making. So most phishing tests, they capture the majority of folks who click on the email link within the first hour. And if you target phishing, first thing in the morning, before they've had their coffee maybe, you're mirroring a lot of what some of the most sophisticated real-world phishing attacks are trying to do to leverage fatigue. In terms of curiosity, the number one reason, of course, is users are going to interact with the contents of the message is curiosity. It's also the reason someone might insert a USB stick into, that's been left lying around the office as a part of maybe a red team exercise. So for many users, the idea that they might come to know something that they were not privy to on their own is an irresistible urge. This is what happened to SANS.org recently as well. Somebody sent around a phishing email that had a promise of learning people's bonuses, and they harvested credentials. So even the strong, right, in the SANS training and acknowledgement teams can eventually fall victim to curiosity. It's a part of human nature, of course, and I like to think we need to be digitally empathetic. We can't blame the users for being human. We simply have to build tools and situations that make it less common and possible for them to make these mistakes. In terms of vanity, this one's kind of interesting because it's, obviously excessive pride or admiration in your own appearance or achievements. There's several ways to engage users with this one. And recently, some interesting phishing attacks have used Instagram verified identity. The email asks the victims to apply for an exclusive verified account status, capturing their credentials along the way. And the scam, it centers around Instagram's labeling of those verified accounts, where you get, I think, like a blue check mark next to it. And so the exclusive status is highly desirable for these users. Vanity award emails are also out in the business, where a business has been selected for maybe the 2021 Best of Insert City Name Awards. And as the similar emails to unsuspecting businesses get sent and nonprofits throughout the year, the winner has to pay $150, maybe $200 to claim the honor. And of course, you've also lost your credential, potentially, for clicking on that link and reading the attachment. And then, of course, lastly, greed. Intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, or food. Successful phishing attacks and these tests exploit human weaknesses, of course, and greed is certainly one of them. So people have been known to make some really dumb decisions when they let greed get the better of them. And cyber criminals are not just targeting potential victims with offers of cash prizes. They might be offering a 2-for-1 dinner coupon, right? That sounds harmless enough. And of course, recently the gaming industry has been used to invite users with the promise of new character skins for Fortnite or free V-Bucks. Transfer of virtual assets requires providing your credentials, of course, and that's the real intent of the campaign. So now let's talk about third-party risk management. This is one of the things I wanted to make sure that we spent a little time talking about, because that's something that Security Scorecard knows a lot about. But what is first-party risk, second-party risk, third-party risk, and nth-party risk? Well, let me explain that a little bit. So first-party risk, I've got 4 dimensions I'm looking at here. Self-attestation. You fill out a form and say, okay, I know what my risk is. You have complete internal awareness, and trust is exhibited through control. This is typically the domain of an enterprise risk management program. How do you manage and risk and track your own risks and mitigations? Second party is your customers. So think about customer attestation, and customers have a firsthand but partial awareness of your infrastructure, whether they've started to try to buy something and check it out and add it to a shopping cart, and that shopping cart fails, or the transaction fails, and so, or they see the success of you beginning, to buy goods and services online. Trust is exhibited through familiarity and brand loyalty, and of course, contractual risk management is the domain for mitigating that risk. But really, the last year and a half, or since pandemic and COVID lockdown, third-party risk has really taken center stage with all of these supply chain attacks like Colonial Pipeline and Kaseya and SolarWinds, and then just name the vulnerability. There's been one every month at least. You have incomplete awareness about a third party's infrastructure, and you often have external attestation. And trust is exhibited through impartiality. So often, if we're going to do a penetration test of infrastructure, we like to look and see that you have an objective approach to it. That's why we ask a third party to do these pen tests, so that you're not biased as to what you're testing or what you're not. And of course, vendor risk management, VRM, or third-party risk management, TPRM, is the framework in which you document and identify this risk. And then, of course, your third parties have providers as well. So those are your nth parties or fourth party risk. In this case, you have peer attestation. you have minimal awareness of the application stack, trust is essentially exhibited through proxy. You are using this platform as a third party, and they're trusting that fourth party to provide infrastructure. And of course, ecosystem risk management is the concept that I wanted to populate. We can't really just think about a 3-link chain. It's not just you, your one link upstream provider, and your one link downstream consumer or subscriber of your data flow or your supply. You have to think of the entire risk chain. So take, for example, when the Ever Given lodged itself sideways in the Suez Canal in March for 6 months or 6 days, how many markets were affected? Supply chain is not just about those first-degree neighbors and downstream relationships of goods and services. It has to be about the entire ecosystem. And let's see, next up, I wanted to talk a little bit about continuous monitoring. So the days are gone of being able to send out a lazy questionnaire once a year to your top vendors and say, have you been breached in the last 12 months? Do you have, antivirus software? Do you have encryption at rest? And so I like to invoke the ancient Greek philosopher and historian Heraclitus, who once said something along the lines of, you can never step into the same river twice. And the reason I like this quote is because it's not AI or machine learning hype, right? This is OG InfoSec. The river analogy, I think, works quite well as well. Some folks want to sit in an inner tube with a 6-pack of beer and float lazily along a winding oxbow of the river. And others are going to jump into the raft, right? Strap on a helmet and head straight for the Class 5 rapids in order to get to the next stretch of their digital journey. So your risk posture changes every minute of every day. I'm not the same CISO I was, a year ago when I joined Security Scorecard, and the world has changed a lot since then. So without continuous monitoring of your third-party risk, I don't think you're really achieving adequate security awareness. And so talking about continuous monitoring, let me throw out some facts, some numbers here. So Security Scorecard, our ratings platform continuously monitors over 11 million companies by scanning the entirety of IPv4 every day. And some network segments, like those for cloud service providers, we scan 12 times per day because IP addresses used in AWS and Google and Azure changing hands pretty often, sometimes on an intraday basis. That's why we need to have attribution 10 of those 12 times of those scans for us to attribute a particular vulnerability that we see to that IP address. And of course, we see 30 to 40 billion security findings discovered and mapped by our ratings engine every week. And we operate a top 5 sinkhole, which ingests around 700 million malware events observed each day. And so this is, like I said, part of the modern risk approach, part of modern governance, having something that's able to keep tabs on the swiftly moving currents of the river and to understand what your risk is and how it's changing from moment to moment. The other piece that I wanted to mention about third-party risk management is event-based assessments. So here, think of a Shields Up event, right? The enterprise Shields Up. What was the rule that triggered it, right? Do you want to disable that vendor access and their integrations? Maybe there's a risk of business email compromise. And which assessment would you send to that vendor based on that breach event or that score drop? We have over 30 different frameworks available on our platform, including SIG Lite, SIG Full. You have PCI compliance, NIST 800/53, of course, and you send the appropriate questionnaire based on the data classification for that vendor. This is a particularly powerful combination, of course, because we have customers with over 20,000 vendors that they're constantly monitoring and tracking. And you wouldn't want to have to hire 300 people to run your VRM team to do that. And so it's important to be able to get an immediate kind of assessment or reassessment of the vendor with zero touch from the InfoSec team, because we're scanning the internet and there's no agent-based or software needed to be required to install on the client side or on the vendor side. So you can scale to thousands of continuously monitored companies instead of choosing just a select few to send them out to every year. Score drop events, breach events, even individual CVEs that show up can trigger an assessment. We've created custom questionnaires, for example, when the proxy logon vulnerability showed up for Microsoft, so that we could send them out and help our customers send them out to all of their vendors as due diligence exchange of risk profiles happens. And so rather than doing that via email, you can do that with our platform. And then, of course, we can map up those security findings of the scanning right next to their attestations or assertions and prove them wrong or prove them right. Do they have any vulnerabilities open from 2019, an old Apache or Nginx server, even though they're attesting that they patch every month? Of course, you can tailor the assessment based on the vendor portfolio, PCI for financial services, maybe a HIPAA, assessment for somebody that's involved in, medical and health record information. And of course, it allows you to maintain a small VRM team on your side while expanding complete coverage and visibility. And so when you look at the type of assessments that we have seen requested by customers, some of the popular formats and frameworks that are being used, obviously SIG, NIST, CSF is very common, ISO, for example, ISO 27001, and also CMMC. And what's probably a little bit shocking for some of you to see, the average turnaround time is 7 days to complete. I know some companies that spend 6 months getting a questionnaire back to me. And so we try to expedite that and take the friction out of it, and therefore give better visibility into risk. Around 2 days for the sender to close it out, and about 3 or 4 rounds of iterations between asking questions and follow-up questions. And then the last question, what's more common, standard questionnaires or custom? We see most customers are creating custom questionnaires. So they're taking a standard and then deleting some questions or adding a few more. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention a little bit of the guidance from Principles of Board Governance of Cyber Risk. So this is from March of this year. Security Scorecard was named a technology pioneer by the World Economic Forum in 2020. And I was nominated to join the working groups on cyber resilience in the oil and gas industry, and in the strategy documents for this white paper, talking about the top 6 principles for modern governance of cyber risk. So if you'd like a copy of the slides, I've got a hyperlink in here, but you can find it by looking for the World Economic Forum Principles of Cyber Risk. And then the second document, and this one just came out in August, this has got case studies, and although, again, it was written for the oil and gas industry, it's pretty much applicable to every industry and every industry in general. And so this contains 7 case studies on how different industry leaders like Shell and Palo Alto Networks and Security Scorecard and others are using automation at scale to deliver visibility and mitigation of third-party risk. So here I had a little bit of a Q&A slide. This is a little bit about myself, as being, some of my backgrounds, having built infrastructure for many years and focused on InfoSec in the last 5 or 6 years. But basically, I'll just throw up this QR code, and don't worry, it's not malware. It's just a mail to link if you'd like to request a copy of this deck. So at that point, I think I can take any questions that you might have.
Absolutely, yeah, great presentation. Really cool stuff. We do have some questions for you.
Oh, I was
going to bring it.
Advancing the wrong slide. There we go. There's the QR code.
Oh, there we go. Excellent. Yeah, let's leave that up for a second, and then I'll bring up the poll just to give everyone time. If you want to scan that QR code right there, that way you can get an email of the presentation. So go ahead and check that out. Mike has also generously provided his email there on the screen. If you want to contact him using that, feel free to do that for additional questions. And of course, we encourage questions here in the audience console as well. And we got a lot of great questions coming in. Mike, let's see. First question I wanted to ask you is about, they say here, what are the most important metrics to be looking at and reporting on when it comes to a TPRM program?
Well, great. Yeah, I think you want to be able to quantify your own posture and show the improvements that your security program has made to your own company's footprint or security hygiene and resilience to some of these risks. And you want to be able to quantify that of your third parties and your vendors. And so making these things reportable and understandable to the board of directors is one of the reasons why we've created these letter grades. And so we know statistically, for example, looking at breach information, at companies with a D or worse are 7.7 times more likely to be breached than the company with an A. And so getting yourself to an A isn't the end of the journey, though. It just means you're doing the basics right? Doing DNS, having proper HTTPS headers, and not having vulnerable software as a part of your endpoints, whether it's APIs or a website. And so I think some of the best KPIs are simply coming up with a metric that you report on regularly to the board and to the executive team that shows that you need help and you need resources if you have a low score, or that you're doing a good job and that you're now starting to focus on your weakest link, which is often your third parties. The bad guys go after your suppliers if they can't attack you.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, I'm going to move on to the poll question. for everyone out there, we encourage your feedback there on the poll. What additional information would you like about Security Scorecard? And here's a good question. This one just came in, Mike. They're asking if you have any advice on setting up a balanced scorecard to evaluate the right security posture.
Well, we have 10 factors that we use to come up with a total score for a company or for an entity, I guess, because not everything is a company, right? A nonprofit or a government agency are also having scorecards. And it's a matter of understanding what is your sort of risk appetite. So some companies may not care about some of the factors. They may not care about hacker chatter and dark web things that we're able to ascertain from our partners and marketplace integrations that we have with companies that specialize in that, like Cyber Angel or Dark Owl and other places. And so you want to make sure that you're focusing, maybe every quarter on one particular factor that's taken a hit, whether it's endpoint detection. And people often wonder, how do you find out, that we're running a Windows 7, operating system or have an outdated Chrome? We use purchasing of ad tech data. So we're not purchasing the data to figure out what to sell you. We're simply pulling in the user agent string, which explains, exactly what version of web browser and operating system you have. And that way we can attribute it to your IP address and then know whether or not you have this risk of running outdated browsers or operating systems that aren't receiving security updates anymore. And that's a pretty strong finding. Another strong finding that is focused on endpoint security would be Microsoft RDP. If RDP is remote desktop protocol is exposed to the internet, that's a very strong correlation between the likelihood of a breach event.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Let's see. Next question here. You mentioned zero trust. Everybody's heard about zero trust. The question here, why the goal of a third-party risk management program is to be able to trust vendors. The zero trust framework is key to securing a business. So how can you implement a zero trust framework if you have third parties in that equation?
Well, one of the mantras of zero trust is never trust, always verify. And so if you don't have the ability to know that your vendor was breached yesterday, and you don't know about it until they've sent you a questionnaire saying, yes, we were breached, you don't have your finger on the pulse of risk. And so third-party, like I said, third-party risk, the attack surface for your vendors and your providers is much larger than your own usually. So think, for example, of SolarWinds being able to compromise FireEye. FireEye maintained an A, right? They're very paranoid, very talented security people there. But that supply chain attack was their Achilles heel, as they say. And so FireEye didn't have the ability to do egress monitoring, right, to see that there was traffic going out to command and control servers. And so they had a blind spot, and so they've learned from that experience. But in terms of third-party risk and zero trust, this is just one of the tools that should be in your quiver, right? That allows you to understand when the security posture has changed and when you do want to go shields up or when you do want to block the logins from your third parties that are contractors or suppliers because of a breach event, a score drop, or just a gradual decline in their score over the last 12 months. And that's one of the beautiful things about the platform. You get an instant 12-month history for any scorecard or company name you type into the platform. You don't have to say, okay, we started monitoring today. You get to look at what was their trajectory running into today, and you can kind of see whether they've maintained a good score or they're on a downwards decline. That was the case, for example, with SolarWinds and with Kaseya and a couple of other vendors. They really do validate our model of being able to predict the likelihood of breach.
Okay, interesting, yeah. And then another question, they want to know, if there's a vendor out there you work with that has a poor security or CVE on a scorecard, how do you approach them? Any advice?
Yeah, I oftentimes reach out to the team and ask whoever's wanting to onboard this vendor that we're working with, and if they have some findings that are challenging, or if you find that one of your major service providers is not really that great, write it into the contract that it's a requirement for them to maintain a B or better in order to put some teeth into the relationship, and not just say, oh, well, we're wringing our hands and we really wish that you didn't have outdated versions of Apache or Nginx or other types of software on your platform. Make it part of the business contract. And that way you can, with good cause, sever it and find a replacement vendor. But generally, I try to lift them up, right? We're in this business together. We're in this world. Security Scorecard's mission is to help make the world a safer place. We're a proactive tool, right? We happen and do our best work to the left of boom, right, before an incident happens. And so that proactive outreach is often well received. Although some CISOs, I do have to admit, I feel like I'm going through the 5 stages of grief with them. When I talk to them about their scorecard, and they're like, oh, there's denial, and there's frustration, and there's anger and bartering, and then eventually they reach acceptance, and they said, you're right. I wish you didn't have the ability to know that these are some of my weaknesses. We need to work on getting them patched and solved.
Okay. All right. Excellent advice. So it looks like we're starting to run out of time here in our live Q&A session. But before we go, what should folks do if they want to learn more about Security Scorecard?
Well, you can get a free scorecard just by logging in with your company domain name and see what your score and see what your risk is. We don't charge for that. It's not pay to play. And you can even submit improvements or corrections if your digital footprint is off because attribution is hard. The internet's a fast-moving place. So try out the platform. Go to our trust portal, see exactly how we score and weight everything. We're very transparent about that. But get your free scorecard, and from there, I'm sure you'll fall in love with the depth of insight and visibility that it gives you, because that's power, that's control, understanding what your risks are, and discovering things that you didn't even know that someone had bought, a Linode server to run a brochure site 5 years ago that's still part of your DNS that's not being patched. And so the discovery aspect is quite powerful, and so that's a good way to get started.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very cool. That sounds like a great opportunity for a lot of folks out there. You can go to securityscorecard.com and right there on the homepage, get instant score, sign up for that, and get your own score for free. So excellent. All right. Well, Mike, it's been great having you on the EcoCast today. Thank you so much for your great presentation.
Thank you. I'm happy to talk with anyone that wants to follow up.
Excellent. And thank you to Security Scorecard for supporting the event today. Check out that download there in the Handouts tab. It's the complete guide to building your vendor risk management program by Security Scorecard. It looks like an excellent resource, so make sure you download that before the event ends. And with that, I'm about to announce the winner of our final Amazon $500 gift card. I will leave the poll question up for anyone out there who hasn't yet responded. We do want to get your feedback. I'm just routing these questions here that remain over to Mike. Excellent. Thank you to everyone for the questions. And with that, it's time for our final Amazon $500 gift card. This one's going to Tim Long from Massachusetts. Congratulations, Tim Long from Massachusetts. Before you go, I want to remind you to check out gorilla.guide. It's there you can download free educational IT books and sign up for the free Gorilla Guide Book Club. A lot of great content out there is on security as well. Don't forget about the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. Get the latest on enterprise technology in just 10 minutes. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming MegaCast or EcoCast event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to chat with you. And then, finally, before you go, don't forget about another upcoming event we have. This is the Discovery Days IT Journey series, talking about the technologies today that will transform tomorrow. This is happening Tuesday, October 5th at 12 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be a great series of presentations, as well as some awesome prizes you see there on the screen. So if you want to learn about the technologies that will transform the future of enterprise technology, I encourage you to sign up for Discovery Days. You can register at events.actualtechmedia.com or also watch your email inbox for invitations to that event. And with that, I want to thank everyone who joined us on the event today. We will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.